Chapter 2280. Seeing that Nyetian was willing to become friends with them, Roten and the rest were very happy. They looked at Nyetian with undisguised respect. They felt that it was a great honor for Nyetian to acknowledge them as friends. Roten and Ling Yi were the happiest. They both had grievances with Nyetian and even wanted to kill Nyetian. But now, they were glad that they didn't completely offend Nyetian. Roten recalled Nyetian's threat and felt an inexplicable fear in his heart. At that time, he treated Nyetian's threat as a joke. But now, he understood that if he took the wrong path, he would truly be consigned to eternal damnation. Sect Masters, the sword intents you've absorbed need to be slowly integrated. I hope that your achievements in the future will improve. Nyetian faintly smiled and prepared to leave. He was worried about the Sacred Heaven defying sword and didn't want to stay here any longer. Jun Chujian and the rest had just absorbed the Sacred Heaven sword intent and needed time to integrate and transform it into their own power. At this moment, Nyetian recalled this matter and reminded Jun Chujian, "Oh right, Lord Alliance Lord, the Sacred Heaven Sword Mound must be well protected. Don't let anyone enter." "Okay." Jun Chujian nodded and said, "I will immediately protect Mount Xingtian and make it the number 1 forbidden ground of the Sacred Heaven Sword Union. No one is allowed to come within 10,000 meters of Mount Xingtian." Jun Chujian naturally wouldn't take the Sacred Heaven Ancestors' warning seriously. QL-11, the Sacred Heaven Sword Mound, hid something that could destroy the entire abandoned land. Thus, the entire Mount Xingtian had to be sealed. "That's good." Nyetian faintly smiled and left the Sacred Heaven Hall. Jun Chujian and the rest stared at Nyetian's back in shock. "Alliance Master, who do you think Mr. Nyetian is?" Roten couldn't contain his curiosity and asked in a deep voice. "I don't know." Jun Chujian shook his head and glanced at the 6 sect leaders. "Everyone, it's better not to know some secrets that don't belong to you." "Understood." The eyes of Roten and the others trembled, and they quickly nodded and replied. They could all sense that Nyetian's true identity was definitely shocking. It was a good thing not to know such a shocking secret. Nyetian left the Sagely Heaven Hall and went straight back to his room. "Nyetian, what happened after you entered that space?" Fat Cat's urgent voice rang out as soon as he sat down. Fat Cat couldn't communicate with Nyetian when Nyetian entered the space of the Trigri Sacred Formation, so she was very curious about what the latter had experienced. Nyetian naturally didn't hide anything from Fat Cat. He told her everything that happened in the Trigri Sacred Formation in detail. Trigri Sacred Formation. Could it be the legendary Khanate Sacred Formation? Fat Cat's eyes trembled after hearing Nyetian's words. Nyetian's eyes narrowed, and he asked, "Fat, what's a Khanate Sacred Formation?" Little Fat Cat furrowed its brows and explained, "Normally, all kinds of formations are created by array masters. However, there's a type of formation that is naturally formed by the heavens and earth. It's called the Khanate Sacred Formation. If I remember correctly, the Trigri Sacred Formation is one of the 10 Khanate Sacred Formations." Nyetian furrowed his brows in surprise. He didn't expect that even formations could be naturally formed. From Fat Cat's expression, it seemed that the Trigri Sacred Formation was very powerful. "Fat, if the Trigri Sacred Formation was formed by the heavens and earth, why was the Sacred Heaven Ancestor able to form it?" Nyetian suddenly thought of this and couldn't help but ask, "I don't know." Fat Cat shook her head and said with a serious expression, "The Tao of Trigri, Heavenly Tao, Earthly Rhythm, and Human Heart. These 3 are martial intents that are in harmony with the heavens and earth. Countless cultivators spend their entire lives trying to comprehend these martial intents. Nyetian, with your talent, you must have comprehended something from the Trigri Sacred Formation." Nyetian was stunned for a moment. He had only told her about his experience and didn't mention the Sacred Heaven Defying Sword. With a complacent smile, Nyetian displayed the Saint Heaven Defying Sword to the little Fat Cat with a thought. "I've derived a new sword incantation." However, when Fat Cat saw the Sacred Heaven Defying Sword, Her entire body turned sluggish. She froze on the spot and didn't react for a long time. Fat, what's wrong? Nyetian asked curiously after seeing Fat Cat's reaction. Fat Cat finally reacted and asked in surprise, "This is what you comprehended from the Trigri sacred formation?" "Yes." Nyetian nodded and asked, "Is there something wrong?" Fat Cat was speechless. She shook her head and didn't say anything. However, she was incomparably shocked. The Trigri sacred formation contains the Tao of Trigri. I can't believe Nyetian actually derived a set of inverse 3 talents sword incantations from the holy formation. What's going on? The Trigri sacred formation could only comprehend the Tao of Trigri, but Nyetian actually comprehended the Tao of Trigri. Fat Cat couldn't figure out why. Fat Cat vaguely had a premonition that Nyetian's martial Tao fate was different from ordinary people. However, she didn't think too much about it and said, "Nyetian, show me the power of the sacred heaven-defying sword." "Sure," Nyetian said. Immediately afterwards, the 9 extremities appeared in his hand, and he jumped into it. The 9 extremities world was very mysterious. The divine power in the space was very strong. Nyetian didn't disturb Pichio and Jean Tuesday. Instead, he came to a canyon. Now, there are only 3 moves in the sacred heaven-defying sword: star cutting with the human sword, moon swallowing with the earth sword, and sun defying with the heavenly sword. Nyetian murmured with a smile. Then he fixed his eyes on a huge rock with a radius of about 10 meters. God-piercing sword. The next moment, a stream of sword essence gushed out from his palm. Using his palm as a sword, he directly slapped out. Bang! The sword essence turned into a sword shadow and bombarded the huge rock. After a muffled sound, a deep depression appeared on the huge rock. Nyetian nodded slightly and said lightly, "Let's try the star cutting with the human sword." Then, he released a sword essence of the same size. Using his palm as a sword, he slapped out. Bang! The sword shadow was as fast as lightning. After a loud explosion, the huge rock was directly pierced through. What? Nyetian was struck dumb by the scene in front of him. He took a deep breath and didn't know what to say. The sword essence of the same size was used in different sword moves, but there was a huge gap between them. God-piercing sword was one of the advanced 3 moves of the AO sword tactics. It was definitely a very strong sword move. But in front of the star cutting with the human sword, it was very weak. The power of the star cutting with the human sword was at least several times, or even dozens of times stronger than that of God-piercing sword. Moreover, this was the first time that Nyetian used the star cutting with the human sword. In the future, when he completely mastered the star cutting with the human sword, it would definitely be more powerful. Another point was that the star cutting with the human sword was the weakest of the 3 sword moves. Moon swallowing with the earth sword and sun defying with the heavenly sword were both stronger than the star cutting with the human sword. Sacred heaven-defying sword is even stronger than the AO sword tactics. After a while, Nyetian calmed down and couldn't help but smile proudly. Chapter 2281. The power of the reverse sword stance was beyond Nyetian's imagination, making him very excited. He felt that the power of the mortal sword-cutting stars was comparable to the forbidden technique of proud sword arts. And he knew that the power of the earth sword and heaven sword would be stronger than the mortal sword. Then, he flipped his palm, and another sword essence gushed out. Then, he moved his palm, and the sword essence whistled out. But this sword had no power. The sword's shadow withered and disappeared in midair. What happened? Nyetian was shocked, his face full of horror. This time, he used the earth sword swallowing moon, but the power was almost 0. Nyetian, you are too impatient. At this time, Fat Cat's figure appeared, smiled faintly, and said, I have already seen through your reverse sword stance. Mortal sword, earth sword, heaven sword, their power increases step by step. The power of the earth sword is probably more than 10 times that of the mortal sword, and the power of the heaven sword is more than 10 times that of the earth sword. Hearing Fat Cat's words, Nyetian's eyes couldn't help but sink and asked in surprise, Impossible? He knew that the earth sword and heaven sword were very strong, But this increase in power was too great, beyond his imagination. Moreover, if the Earth Sword and Heaven Sword were really that powerful, why did his Earth Sword Swallowing Moon have no power at all? You are very strange, aren't you? Fat Cat laughed and said, although the reverse sword stance was created by you, you don't have a clear understanding of these three sword stances. The Earth Sword and Heaven Sword are powerful because of their power. So right now, it is still a bit difficult for you to truly wield the power of the Earth Sword and Heaven Sword. You must first understand the mortal sword-cutting stars. As for the other two stances, you can ignore them for now. Nietian was surprised and asked, why? He created the reverse sword stance at the same time. But now Fat Cat told him to only understand mortal sword-cutting stars. Of course he felt strange. Three talents, human heart, earth rhythm, heaven Tao. The Fat Cat's expression turned slightly solemn as she said, three great true meanings, each stronger than the other, and they are closely related to each other. For you, the three swords of heaven, earth, and man are just a ladder. The human sword is the lowest step. If you can't even fully understand the human sword, how are you going to learn the earth sword and heaven sword? Nietian narrowed his eyes and immediately understood what the Fat Cat meant. Human sword, earth sword, heaven sword, it was a gradual process. To comprehend the earth sword and heaven sword, Nietian must first fully grasp the human sword. This was just like the process of growing up. Before one started, it was impossible to run away. In fact, when Nietian practiced the proud sword tactics, there's also a process. First, the three beginner moves, then the intermediate, advanced, extreme, and forbidden moves, and then the sword formation and the sword intent boundary. But now, he still needed a process for the three styles of Nietian. If that's the case, then I'll start with the human sword cutting the stars. Nietian smiled faintly, then sat cross-legged. His divine sense entered the starry sky sword formation of the primal star stone and began his own path of enlightenment. The Fat Cat looked at Nietian with a bitter smile and sighed in his heart. Nietian, I really don't understand how you could comprehend the three styles of inverse sword from the three talents holy formation. The Fat Cat still didn't understand how Nietian could comprehend the sacred heaven-defying sword from the three talents holy formation. He had a feeling that Nietian was hiding a big secret that even he couldn't see through. As for what this big secret was, the Fat Cat couldn't understand it with his current ability. Maybe when I grow the eighth tail, I'll be able to see some clues. The Fat Cat turned to look at his 7 tails and smiled bitterly. Then he moved and returned to the origin fetus space. There was still some time before the 3-month deadline. Nietian decided to stay in the Sacred Heaven Sword League for a while. It was safe here anyway, and he needed to continue comprehending the Sacred Heaven-defying sword. 10 days passed in the blink of an eye. There were less than 10 days left until the 3-month deadline. Nietian walked out of his room, his body releasing a sharp aura. His eyes were shining with vigor. 10 days of hard work and comprehension had made his aura rise again. However, it would still be difficult for him to break through to the mid-stage paramount god or improve his sword Tao. Over the past 10 days, his biggest gain was the comprehension of the 3 styles of inverse sword. He kept cultivating in the starry sky sword formation. Right now, he could freely use the human sword to cut the stars. However, he still couldn't use the earth sword and heaven sword to their full potential. Nietian walked out of the courtyard to bid farewell to Jun Chujian. QL11, it was about time for him to go back. At the same time, outside of Mount Xingtian, after the opening of the Sacred Heaven Sword Seal, Mount Xingtian had become a number 1 forbidden ground of the Sacred Heaven Sword League. No one was allowed to come within 10,000 meters of Mount Xingtian. Hundreds of black-clothed swordsmen stood in the sky above the peak, guarding the sacred heaven peak day and night. In the dark, there were also elders of the Sacred Heaven Sword League, spying on them to prevent any accidents. Below the Sacred Heaven Peak was the Sacred Heaven Sword Tomb. In the Sacred Heaven Sword Tomb lay a terrifying existence. Therefore, the safety of Mount Xingtian not only concerned the safety of the Cloud Valley Sacred Heaven, but also the survival of the entire land of the Forsaken. 100 swordsmen stood guard outside the sacred sky peak, and it was heavily guarded. However, at this moment, in the distant sky, a sword will appeared like a raging dragon rolling over. That sword intent was actually a darkness sword intent. It descended from the sky like a black bolt of lightning, roaring violently. "Who's there?" the sword guardian bellowed at the same time. Following this, their figures moved at the same time and instantly formed a sword intent formation in the air. These 100 swordsmen were carefully selected. Their sword intents were of similar attributes, so they could form a sword intent formation in an instant. They were all peak paramount gods, and when they formed the formation together, they could resist the attack of a half-saint. The sword intent formation revolved, and the sword intent flowed in the air, releasing a powerful aura. "A bunch of ants dares to stand in my way." Right at this moment, a low voice that was like thunder resounded in the sky. It was boundlessly terrifying and emitted a terrifying aura of ruthlessness. Following which, the dark sword intent in the air suddenly surged and expanded several times in an instant. It was like a black mountain crashing down. Rumble. In the next moment, the black sword shadow landed heavily on the sword intent formation. A deafening explosion sounded in the air, and the entire formation was torn apart by the sword intent. Boundless sword intent and the power of the formation surged and filled the air, spreading in all directions like raging waves. What followed was a series of heart-wrenching screams. The 100 swordsmen were sent flying at the same time, leaving trails of blood in the air. The air was filled with the stench of blood. Chapter 2282. The dark sword descended and wiped out the 100 swordsmen. The 100 pinnacle paramount god swordsmen were either dead or injured. It was a tragic scene. Is this the strength of the Sacred Heaven Sword Alliance? They can't even withstand a single blow. A violent voice sounded in the void. Then a black-clothed figure descended with a mountainous and ocean-like aura. Just by standing there, he exerted pressure on the space, as if he was a boundless mountain. This person only had the appearance of a middle-aged man, but the aura of darkness around him was boundless, as if he was a dark abyss. "Who's there?" An angry roar sounded the moment the black-clothed figure descended. A swordsman with a white sword appeared and stared at the black-clothed figure. This swordsman with a white sword was an elder of the Sacred Heaven Sword Alliance, a legendary swordsman who could fuse sword and martial arts into one. The elders of the Sacred Heaven Sword Alliance were considered the top experts of the Alliance, and they were only slightly weaker than the Alliance Master and Sect Master. In order to better protect Mount Shangtian, Jun Chujian not only sent the swordsman to guard it, but he also secretly arranged for elders to protect it. Right after this elder appeared, 3 more figures appeared in the void. It was another 3 elders. The 4 swordsmen immediately surrounded the black-clothed figure. "Who are you? What business do you have in the Sacred Heaven Sword Alliance?" An elder spoke first and asked in a cold tone. The 4 elders didn't make a move because they could already sense that the newcomer was far stronger than them. "The Sacred Heaven Sword seal has been opened. How could I not come take a look at such a big event?" The black-clothed figure laughed wildly. Then his chest heaved up and down as he roared, "Jun Chujian, get the hell out here." Boom! The violent voice sounded like thunder from the 9 heavens, resounding in the void and spreading throughout the entire Cloud Valley, Sacred Heaven. When the 4 elders saw this, their eyes trembled and their faces were filled with fear. Who was this black-clothed figure? Why was he so arrogant? He came to the Cloud Valley Sacred Heaven and called Jun Chujian by his name, asking him to get the hell out. This insolence could be said to be world-shaking. Jun Chujian was the leader of the Sacred Heaven Sword Union, and even the 3 legendary swordsmen had to show respect to him. Just what was the identity of this black-robed man? He didn't put Jun Chujian in his eyes at all. "Who exactly are you? How can you call the Alliance Master's name so casually?" An elder mustered up his courage and spoke coldly. However, his voice was clearly lacking in confidence. "A bunch of trash. Get lost," the black-robed man roared. His body trembled as a violent sword intent gushed out of him. Like a raging tsunami, it rampaged forward. Bang, 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 bang. The four elders were simultaneously struck by the violent waves of sword will. They couldn't withstand it and were directly sent flying. The four of them used all their strength to stabilize their bodies, but there was a trace of blood at the corner of their mouths. Their eyes were filled with fear. They didn't expect this black-robed man to be so powerful. Just the sword intent that gushed out was enough to injure them. For trash, say another word and I'll kill you, the black-robed man sneered and said. The four elders were stunned and didn't dare to make a sound. This black-robed man was too violent. He wanted to kill without saying a word. At this moment, countless swordsmen gathered outside Mount Xingtian and looked at the black-robed man in fear. Mount Xingtian had just become the #1 forbidden ground not long ago, and someone was already here to cause trouble. This was a big matter. Who is this guy? How dare he come to the sacred heaven sword union to cause trouble? Is he tired of living? Don't talk nonsense. This person is very powerful. He has already killed many guard swordsmen. Even the four elders don't dare to speak. This person's sword Dao is so strong. He's at least at the same level as the sword sect master. He wants to see the alliance master. Does he have some enmity with the alliance master? The crowd discussed and looked at the black-robed man with even more fear. Jun Chujian, are you still not coming out? The black-robed man swept his gaze across the crowd and roared, I'll count to 3. If you don't come out, I'll start killing. 1. As he spoke, the black-robed man actually began to count and shouted the word 1. The crowd felt their hearts tremble as if they were hit in the head with a stick. Everyone was guessing if the black-robed man was really going to kill them. 3. Just when the crowd was in doubt, the black-robed man opened his mouth again and shouted the word 3. Ha ha ha. Looks like I'm really going to start a massacre. The black-robed man laughed wildly. His figure moved, and suddenly, a huge black sword appeared. QL11 without hesitation. He slashed out with his sword. Boom! The black sword shadow was like a mad dragon, slashing down at the crowd with the power to tear the world apart. Run! The crowd screamed and fled in all directions. Those who could not run in time became souls under the sword. The sword fell, and blood splattered everywhere. The black-robed man killed at least 1,000 swordsmen with this sword. A bunch of scum. You run fast. The black-robed man laughed loudly. His eyes were bloodshot, and he looked like a ferocious beast. In his eyes, the people he killed just now were not humans, but insignificant ants. This guy was bloodthirsty and violent. He was simply a lunatic. However, after the sword fell, Jun Chujian was still nowhere to be seen. Still not coming out? The black-robed man laughed coldly, and then locked his gaze on Mount Xingtian. He said arrogantly, Jun Chujian, since you don't dare to show your face, I'll destroy Mount Xingtian. There are fun things under Mount Xingtian. I don't believe that you won't come out. As he spoke, the black-robed man's eyes focused, and he raised a huge black sword in his hand. His entire body surged with sword will, and he looked like a mad demon. Slash! In the next moment, he let out a low roar, and the huge black sword fell. A terrifying sword shadow appeared, drawing a terrifying trajectory in the air, and then it fell on Mount Xingtian. The power of the sword was earth-shattering. Once it fell, the entire Mount Xingtian would definitely be razed to the ground. Even the sacred heaven sword mound would suffer from the impact. The crowd's eyes trembled, and their faces were filled with extreme shock. They even held their breaths. Stop! Just when the terrifying sword shadow was about to fall, a majestic voice rang in the air. Then, an endless stream of sword intent appeared and transformed into a sword shield that steadily blocked the sword shadows in the air. Boom! A rumbling sound was heard, and a visible sword wave spread out, leaving violent ripples in the air. Yo-ho! Seeing this, the black-robed man laughed and said, Jun Chujian didn't come out, but a busybody came. As he spoke, he raised his brows and looked coldly at the swordsman in the sky. In the sky, A black-robed man stood there with sword surging around him, and his sword aura was as majestic as the sea. Chapter 2283. Up in the sky, everyone's eyes fell on Anya Minjia. They were all shocked. They didn't expect to see such a terrifying swordsman. It seemed that this person's sword principle was even stronger than the 6 sect masters, almost on par with the Sword Alliance's master. "Your Excellency, who are you?" Anya Minjia asked the black-robed man as he descended to the ground. He already knew that the sacred Heaven Sword seal had been activated, and he had just arrived at the Cloud Valley Sacred Sky. He didn't expect to see someone attacking Mount Xingtian as soon as he arrived. He didn't even think about it before he stopped the other party. He and Jun Chu Jian had met several times. Although their friendship wasn't very deep, it could be said that they had some friendship. Therefore, it wasn't surprising that he would intervene. "Humph." The black-clothed man glanced at Anya Minjia and said with disdain, "Middle stage, divine sword body. How dare you stand up for Jun Chu Jian with such strength?" Sensing the disdain in the man's eyes, Anya Minjia's face darkened, and he asked in a cold tone, "Are you much stronger than me?" He could tell that the black-clothed man's sword principle cultivation was also at the middle stage divine sword body. "So arrogant." The black-clothed man sneered and said, "Let me guess. You must be one of the 3 legendary swordsmen. Judging from your sword essence, you must be the Sword Saint of Darkness, right?" His tone was full of disdain, as if Anya Minjia was just a country bumpkin in his eyes. "So what?" Anya Minjia's face darkened, and he responded cold. The black-clothed man had guessed his identity, but he didn't know who the black-clothed man was. He didn't even know that there was a sword principle expert in the abandoned land that he didn't know. "Humph." The black-clothed man sneered and said, "Do you think you're so great because you're a legendary swordsman? But in my eyes, you're just a piece of trash. I'm not targeting you. I just think that you 3 legendary swordsmen are trash." "Huh?" Anya Minjia's face darkened and his eyes became cold. He did not expect the other party to be so arrogant, directly calling the 3 legendary swordsmen trash. When the surrounding crowd heard the words of the man in black, their eyes trembled violently at the same time. Even their expressions became sluggish. From their point of view, the 3 legendary swordsmen were all legendary figures of swordsmanship, existences that could only be seen but not reached. But in the eyes of the black-clothed man, the 3 legends had become trash. Just what was the background of the black-robed man? First, he arrogantly called out Jun Chujin's name, and then he insulted the 3 legends. It was as if to him, these peak swordsmen were not worth mentioning at all. "How arrogant of you." At this moment, a voice rang out in the sky and a figure descended. Looking down on the 3 legendary swordsmen, "That's your biggest mistake." Almost at the same time, another voice rang out, and another figure appeared. Year of the glorious martial phoenix, Sikong Shwani. Hearing these 2 voices, Anya Minjia turned around and saw 2 familiar faces. He couldn't help but call out their names. At this moment, the 2 people in front of him were the other 2 legends, Guangwu Fengyin and Sikong Shwani. These 2 knew that the sacred Heaven Sword seal had been activated, so they rushed over. It seemed like they had come at the right time. As soon as they arrived, they heard people insulting them. How could they tolerate this? The 3 legends. The eyes of the crowd trembled as they exclaimed. It was extremely rare to see the 3 legendary swordsmen appearing at the same time in the land of the abandoned. What shocked the crowd even more was that the person who insulted them was standing in front of the 3 legends. The 3 legends are all here. At this moment, the black-clothed man's reaction was extremely calm. He said with a faint smile, "If the 3 of you have any objections to what I just said, then come out and fight me. I'll give you a chance to fight me together." The calm voice sounded, but it left the crowd dumbfounded. Not only was this black-clothed man arrogant, but he was also extremely courageous. Even the leader of the Sacred Heavens Alliance wouldn't dare to say that he could fight 3 legends on his own. It was unimaginable how terrifying the strength of the 3 legends would be if they joined forces. "You're indeed very powerful, but you're overestimating yourself if you think you can fight the 3 of us alone," Sikong Shwani said in a deep voice with uncontrollable anger in his eyes. Both Anya Minjia and Guangwu Fengyin were extremely furious. They were both peak swordsmen, so they naturally had their own swordsmanship. However, how could they not be angry after being insulted like this? They really wanted to know who this black-clothed man was, and why he dared to make such a bold claim. "Oh," the black-clothed man sneered and said arrogantly, "do the three of you think I'm underestimating you? Forgive me for being blunt, but none of you would be able to withstand a single attack from me." His insolent voice carried a hint of coldness and gloominess. "How arrogant!" Sikong Shwani roared furiously. He could no longer hold it in and slashed out with his sword. Instantly, a thunderous sword shadow appeared and pressed toward the black-clothed man. Guangwu Fengyin and Anya Minjia were stunned, and their eyes narrowed. They wanted to see what was going to happen next. The eyes of the crowd trembled, and their expressions were filled with shock. The scene of a legend swordsman attacking was absolutely shocking. However, the next moment, a strange scene took place. "You're courting death." The black-clothed man sneered and stabbed out with his dark, giant sword. A cold, dark sword shadow appeared and attacked. Boom! The moment the two sword shadows collided, a tearing sound was heard in the sky. That dark sword shadow actually tore the other sword shadow apart. "Oh no!" Sikong Shwani's eyes narrowed as he realized that something was wrong. He screamed and tried to retreat. Unfortunately, it was too late. QL11, the black sword shadow, was extremely sharp and fast as it flew towards Sikong Shwani. "Sikong Shwani!" Anya Minjia and Guangwu Fengyin exclaimed at the same time. The scene was so shocking that they could not believe their eyes. Sikong Shwani and the black-clothed man were equally powerful. Why was there such a huge difference in their combat strength? Sikong Shwani could not even block a single attack from the black-clothed man. Both of them wanted to save Sikong Shwani, but it was already too late. On the other side, Nie Tian appeared and exclaimed in his heart when he saw the scene, "So powerful!" He was very sure that if the sword fell, Sikong Shwani would definitely die. 7 disasters of the Phantom Valley. Stop. At this crucial moment, a mighty voice was heard. Shortly after, a strand of sword intent appeared and enveloped Sikong Shwani like a drizzle, forming a sword intent shield around his body. Bang! In the next moment, the dark sword shadow fell, and Sikong Shwani's body was sent flying with a dull thud. At the same time, a white-clothed figure appeared and caught Sikong Shwani. "Thank you, Alliance Leader." Sikong Shwani stabilized his body and turned around to thank the person beside him. The person who had saved Sikong Shwani was none other than the Alliance Leader of the Sacred Heavens Alliance, Jun Shujian. Chapter 2284. The man in black stared coldly at Jun Shujian with undisguised murderous intent. 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley. You've come to the wrong place to behave atrociously in the Cloud Valley, Sacred Heaven. Jun Shujian said coldly. He was no stranger to the man in front of him. He was the 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley. At this moment, Anya Minjia and Guangwu Fengyin looked at the 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley with shock in their eyes, unable to hide their astonishment. They had never expected the 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley to be so powerful. Sikong Shwani was a legendary swordsman. His strength was comparable to Anya and Guangwu Fengyin. But in front of the 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley, Sikong Shwani was crushed. Just as the 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley had said, none of the 3 legendary swordsmen would be able to take a blow from him. The strangest thing was that the 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley had the same cultivation level as the 3 legendary swordsmen. Why was his strength higher than the 3 legendary swordsmen's? QL 11-inch sword intent. The next moment, Anya Minjia and Guangwu Fengyin reacted at the same time. Their eyes trembled. If a swordsman could suppress another swordsman in the same realm, it could only mean that his sword intent could crush his opponent. The 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley sword intent was very strange. The dark aura in it even made Anya Minjia feel fearful. Anya Minjia was from the Night Elf clan. His sword intent was also of the dark attribute. But compared to the 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley, The dark aura in his sword intent was much weaker. The three legendary swordsmen were already at the pinnacle of swordsmanship. At this moment, they had encountered someone who could completely suppress them in terms of sword intent. One could imagine how shocked they were. But at this moment, they calmed down a little because Jun Chujian had appeared. The seven disasters of the Ghost Valley were obviously here for Jun Chujian. It seemed that there was a deep grudge between the two. Nie Tian also came to the crowd at this time. He did not take the initiative to show himself, but watched from afar. His strength was too weak and would not be of any help in the current situation. What happened next would depend on Jun Chujian. Jun Chujian, your words can scare others, but if you want to scare me, you're too weak. The Ghost Valley's seven disasters laughed maniacally, looking at Jun Chujian with an extremely cold gaze. Jun Chujian's face darkened as he signaled Sikong Xuani to step back. He then took a step forward and got closer to the seven disasters of the Ghost Valley. He looked at the seven disasters of the Ghost Valley with a complicated expression and said cold, "Seven disasters of the Ghost Valley, you didn't come here to kill me. Tell me your real purpose." The Ghost Valley seven disasters had killed so many people from the Sacred Heaven Sword Union and almost destroyed Mount Xingtian, but Jun Chujian could still talk to him calmly. This undoubtedly proved the strength of the Ghost Valley seven disasters, and that there was an even more powerful person behind them. My real purpose? The Ghost Valley's seven disasters sneered as a strange light flashed in his eyes. He said coldly, "Jun Chujian, the Sacred Heaven Sword Seal has been opened. You must have obtained the Sacred Heaven Sword intent. Your complexion seems to be quite good. It seems that the sword scar that Master left in your body has already healed. I really want to see just how strong you are right now." The cold voice was filled with infinite arrogance and a strong sense of mockery. Everyone's eyes trembled as they did not know what the Ghost Valley seven disasters was talking about. But they could see that Jun Chujian seemed to be very afraid of the Ghost Valley's seven disasters. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed at this moment as he was shocked. So, the sword mark in Lord's body was left by the person behind the Ghost Valley's seven disasters. Of course, he knew what the Ghost Valley seven disasters was talking about, because he had seen the sword mark on Jun Chujian's divine sword physique with his own eyes. He had been wondering what kind of expert could injure Jun Chujian so badly. After seeing the Ghost Valley's seven disasters, he vaguely understood. The Ghost Valley seven disasters was already a very terrifying swordsman, and Sikong Xuani could not even take one strike from him. Such a person actually called another person master. One could imagine how powerful that master was. "What? You want to fight me?" Jun Chujian's eyes darkened as he sneered. "Ghost Valley's seven disasters. Don't think that you are very strong just because you defeated Sikong Xuani with one strike. If it's the person behind you, this old man will naturally be wary. But today, you are destined to be no match for I." Jun Chujian's eyes were filled with anger, as if he had had enough of the Ghost Valley's seven disasters' arrogance. "Is that so?" The Ghost Valley's seven disasters sneered, and then the sword intent around him rose. A huge sword aura appeared, like a giant mountain, boundless and dark. The light between heaven and earth became dimmer, and the air was filled with a strong, oppressive aura. The crowd could not help but retreat, distancing themselves from the Ghost Valley's seven disasters. Such a powerful sword aura. Nie Tian could feel the Ghost Valley's seven disasters' powerful sword aura from afar, and he could not help but exclaim in his heart. It was obvious that the Ghost Valley's seven disasters' sword aura was stronger than Sikong Xuani and the others. On the other side, the three legendary swordsmen also felt the power of the Ghost Valley's seven disasters. Their expressions changed, and they could not hide the shock in their eyes. It seemed that the Ghost Valley's seven disasters looked down on them, not because of arrogance, but because this person was really strong. "Ghost Valley's seven disasters. Since you want to fight, then I will fight with you." At this time, Jun Chujian let out a cold roar, and the sword intent from his body surged out like endless waves, rolling in the air. The crowd felt the vibration in the air, and they were even more shocked. Judging from the aura alone, Jun Chujian's strength was indeed much stronger than the Ghost Valley's 7 disasters. But at this time, the Ghost Valley's 7 disasters was not afraid at all. Instead, he sneered and said arrogantly, "Very good. I have not met such a strong opponent for a long time. You old fart, you have some strength after all. Ha ha ha." It seemed that Jun Chujian's strength did not make the Ghost Valley's 7 disasters afraid, but it made him even more violent. "Today, I will use the Ghost Valley's 9 sword to see how strong you, the leader of the Sword Alliance, are." The next moment, the Ghost Valley's 7 disasters shouted. Then his figure moved, and he slashed out with his sword. The violent and dark sword intent roared in the air, as if it wanted to devour the heaven and earth. In an instant, the surrounding space became dark, and the air was filled with an incomparably dark aura. Boom! In the next moment, the boundless dark sword intent gathered together and turned into a 10,000-meter-long sword shadow. Like an ancient beast, it pressed down on Jun Chujian. 3 legendary masters, please protect Mount Shangtian. Jun Chujian stood in the air. His eyes were fierce and fearless. He shouted, and then took a step forward. Outside his body, a giant sword rose. The crowd's eyes instantly became extremely hot, and they stared at the 2 giant sword shadows in the sky. Boom! In the next moment, the 2 sword shadows collided with each other like 2 galloping giant beasts. In an instant, the heaven and earth were silent, and time and space seemed to have stopped. Chapter 2285. High up in the sky, the 2 sword shadows collided with each other. One bright and one dark, one black and one white, like 2 waterfalls colliding with each other. The space became still for a moment. Boom! The next second, endless loud noises and ear-piercing noises were heard. The sword waves that shook the heaven and earth surged in all directions. The space was greatly impacted and shook, as if it was about to collapse. Jun Chujian and the 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley were too powerful. The collision of the 2 swords set off a storm of sword waves in the air. It was even to the extent that space itself was on the verge of collapse as it started to roil. Fortunately, the space-time structure here was very stable, and it could still maintain its state of not being torn apart. If the space-time was torn apart, it would really lead to a catastrophe. Chi. The 2 sword shadows were so powerful that they couldn't defeat each other in an instant. They could only collide with each other, devour each other, and break each other. The ear-piercing sounds kept coming out. The people felt the sword waves in the space, which kept rushing over, forcing them to retreat again. The weaker swordsmen who were slower to retreat directly vomited blood, and their faces turned pale. Mount Xingtan was also impacted by the sword waves, but under the protection of Anya, Minjia, and the other 2 swordsmen, it stood firm. Obviously, Jun Chujian had already expected this, so he asked the 3 legendary swordsmen to protect Mount Shangtian in advance. The 3 legendary swordsmen protected Mount Shangtian together, so they could easily block the sword waves. The people's eyes trembled, and their hearts jumped to their throats. They didn't know what would happen next. Looking up at the 2 figures high up in the sky, Nietian's astonishment was perfectly displayed on his face. The strength of Jun Chujian and the 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley was beyond his expectation and imagination. He couldn't understand how the sword waves in a swordsman's body could be so powerful. Boom! At that instant, a sudden explosion could be heard from the void. Following this, the black sword finally couldn't take it anymore and shattered into pieces. Rumble! Endless violent sword intent spread in all directions in the air. The figures of the Ghost Valley's 7 disasters suffered the most direct impact and were instantly sent flying, drawing a bloody trail in the air. Wow! People in the crowd gasped in shock. But in the next moment, the dark sword intent exploded and engulfed the space. People could no longer see anything, only darkness and chaos in their eyes. After a long time, the sword intent in the sky finally dissipated. 2 silhouettes appeared clearly. They were Jun Chujian and the 7 calamities of the Ghost Valley. At this moment, the two of them were in completely different states. There was a world of difference. Jun Chujian stood tall in the sky. Sword was swirling around him. He was like a sword god descending to the mortal world, proud and aloof. On the other hand, the seven disasters of the Ghost Valley were covered in blood. Their bodies were trembling as if they were going to fall at any moment. There was no doubt that Jun Chujian had won the clash of swords just now. Moreover, he had severely injured the seven disasters of the Ghost Valley. Alliance Master. Alliance Master. The scene in front of them made the crowd burst into an uproar. They cheered for Jun Chujian in unison. Although the seven disasters of the Ghost Valley were strong and arrogant, they were still weaker in front of Jun Chujian. Yet Tian frowned at this moment, and his face didn't look so good. Although the seven disasters of the Ghost Valley had lost, he could tell that the clash of swords just now was not simple. On the surface, Jun Chujian had completely defeated the seven disasters of the Ghost Valley and even crushed them. But the truth was not so. Jun Chujian's strength was only slightly stronger than the seven disasters of the Ghost Valley. The seven disasters of the Ghost Valley swordsmanship was only at the middle stage of the godly sword body, while Jun Chujian was at the late stage of the godly sword body. If the two of them were at the same level, the seven disasters of the Ghost Valley would have won the battle. Because the seven disasters of the Ghost Valley's sword intent was stronger than Jun Chujian's. Fortunately, the sword mark in Jun Chujian's body had already healed. If not, he would have been defeated by the seven disasters of the Ghost Valley. The leader of the Sword Alliance is indeed strong. At this moment, the seven disasters of the Ghost Valley opened his mouth. His body shook, and the blood stains on his body were cleansed. His aura became fierce again. At this moment, there was no fear in his eyes. Instead, there was a playful look. Even though he had lost, he would not show any fear or respect in front of Jun Chujian, because he knew that Jun Chujian was not worthy. Seven disasters of the Ghost Valley. Tell me your real intention. Jun Chujian's face darkened slightly, but he was not aggressive. Instead, he asked in a cold manner. There seemed to be a trace of worry in his eyes, as if he was worried about something. Jun Chujian, I came to the Cloud Valley, sacred heaven, to challenge you. The seven disasters of the Ghost Valley's eyes darkened, and the sword intent in his body surged again. He still wants to fight. The crowd saw this scene, and their eyes trembled violently. They could not hide the passion in their eyes. Who would have thought that the seven disasters of the Ghost Valley would still want to fight after suffering a crushing defeat? Seven disasters of the Ghost Valley. Let's settle the grudge between us in the future. Jun Chujian did not want to fight again. He was anxious to find out the seven disasters of the Ghost Valley's real intention. He said, Tell me, what is your real intention in coming to the Cloud Valley, sacred heaven? Jun Chujian, you're afraid. The seven disasters of the Ghost Valley's eyes flickered, and he was still arrogant. He laughed loudly and said, Even if you defeat me, you won't dare to kill me. Because you're afraid, because you know that you will never be able to defeat my master. Even if master did not come, you are still afraid of him. Am I right? The arrogant voice resounded in the air, as if it was a slap to Jun Chujian's face. Jun Chujian's face was as gloomy as water, and there was not the slightest change in his expression. At this moment, he was not in the mood to care about his reputation. He was more worried about something else. The crowd's gaze kept changing, and they were confused. Who was the master that the seven disasters of the Ghost Valley mentioned? Why would Jun Chujian be afraid of this person? Could it be that this person was stronger than Jun Chujian? And yet Tian frowned, and he looked at Jun Chujian from afar, and he caught the change in the latter's expression perfectly. He knew that the sword mark on Jun Chujian was left behind by the master that the seven disasters of the Ghost Valley had mentioned. Therefore, Jun Chujian definitely had a reason to be afraid. But he could also see that Jun Chujian was worried about something else. The seven disasters of the Ghost Valley obviously did not come to the Cloud Valley Sacred Heaven to fight with Jun Chujian. He must have another intention for coming here. Seven disasters of the Ghost Valley. When did you become so long-winded? Jun Chujian's eyes darkened, and he asked coldly, Jun Chujian, you really are afraid. The seven disasters of the Ghost Valley laughed, and he was extremely arrogant. Even though Jun Chu Jian was trying his best to hide it, he could still see the fear and worry in the former's expression. Master wants me to ask you, is the child that you took away 18 years ago still alive? Then, the seven disasters of the Ghost Valley's mouth twitched, and a strange smile appeared on his face. Chapter 2286. It really happened 18 years ago. Jun Chujian's heart skipped a beat. Even though he tried his best to hide his panic, his face still revealed a look of panic. The thing he was most worried about was stillborn. The real purpose of the seven disasters of the Ghost Valley was indeed for the matter that happened 18 years ago. The crowd looked at the two people in the sky with puzzled eyes. They couldn't understand what Jun Chujian and the seven disasters of the Ghost Valley were talking about. The child from 18 years ago. Nie Tian frowned when he heard the words of the seven disasters of the Ghost Valley. He guessed something in his heart, but he couldn't be sure. Jun Chujian, you knew that this day would come sooner or later. The seven disasters of the Ghost Valley noticed Jun Chujian's panic. He smiled coldly and said, "You're too weak. There are some people you can't protect. Hand him over." There was a strong threat in his voice. Even though the seven disasters of the Ghost Valley was defeated by Jun Chujian, he was still arrogant. He knew that Jun Chujian wouldn't dare to do anything to him. Jun Chujian's eyes flickered violently. His expression kept changing, becoming more and more complicated, as if he was weighing something. The crowd's eyes focused on Jun Chujian and couldn't help but whisper, "What's wrong with the Alliance Master? He seems to be afraid. That Seven Calamities guy is too arrogant. Why didn't the Alliance Master kill him? Who is this seven disasters looking for? What 18 years ago? Why is it getting more and more confusing?" The more the crowd listened, the more confused they became. They could only look at him with burning eyes, as if they were expecting something. The three legends watched from afar. Their expressions were equally shocked. They could see that Jun Chujian was in a very difficult situation. Who was the seven disasters of the Ghost Valley? Who was hiding behind him? To be able to force Jun Chujian to this point. Vaguely, the three legends felt that the sword world and the abandoned land seemed to be much larger than what they knew. At this moment, their horizons had been greatly broadened. Jun Chujian, what's your decision? Speak. The seven disasters of the Ghost Valley were a little impatient when they saw Jun Chujian's hesitation. Jun Chujian's eyes trembled. The next moment, he became firm and said in a deep voice, "Seven disasters of the Ghost Valley. What if I doesn't hand him over? You won't hand him over?" The seven disasters of the Ghost Valley laughed and said coldly, "Do you think you still have a choice in this situation? Are you, Jun Chujian, go to bet the entire Sacred Heaven Sword Union for that kid? You know my master's temper. If you provoke him, your Sacred Heaven Sword Union will be doomed." The cold and gloomy voice was filled with a strong threat. "You're threatening me." Jun Chujian frowned and his eyes darkened. "If you want to interpret my words as a threat, that's fine too." The seven disasters of the Ghost Valley smiled and said, "Jun Chujian, the Sacred Heaven Sword Seal has been opened. You should know a little about the Sacred Heaven Sword Tomb. Master wants me to tell you that you can only choose between the Sacred Heaven Sword Tomb and that kid. I really want to know what you'll choose next." The cold laughter was full of mockery. The seven disasters of the Ghost Valley treated everything in front of them as a game, toying with Jun Chujian. He knows the secret of the Sacred Heaven Sword Tomb. Jun Chujian's eyes trembled, and he suddenly asked. The he mentioned was, of course, the master of the seven disasters of the Ghost Valley. He didn't expect that person to know what was hidden in the Sacred Heaven Sword Tomb. "Jun Chujian, you underestimate my master." The seven disasters of the Ghost Valley sneered and said, "There is something interesting hidden in the Sacred Heaven Sword Tomb. If you choose that kid, then you'll be giving the Sacred Heaven Sword Tomb to my master. Can you, Jun Chujian, bear the crime of destroying the land of the abandoned?" The crowd was stunned and couldn't react for a moment. What was the relationship between the Sacred Heaven Sword Tomb and the land of the abandoned? Nie Tian's eyebrows furrowed as his heart sank. The seven disasters of the Ghost Valley was really vicious. They actually used the entire land of the abandoned to threaten Jun Chujian. QL11 at this moment, he was very curious about the master behind the 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley. So confident? Jun Chujian sneered and responded, 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley. The person behind you underestimated I. Today, don't even think about making I hand over the kid. And no one can touch the sacred Heaven Sword tomb. His eyes were firm as Jun Chujian's attitude suddenly became tough. Oh, the 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley narrowed his eyes. He obviously didn't expect Jun Chujian to suddenly become tough. Jun Chujian, have you really thought it through? After calming down, the 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley said coldly, are you going to bet the sacred Heaven Sword Alliance and even the entire land of the abandoned for someone who has nothing to do with you? Jun Chujian's eyes were cold and firm as he replied, I was entrusted by someone, so I naturally have to be loyal. As long as I, Jun Chujian, am still breathing, I will never allow anyone to take that kid away. The crowd felt Jun Chujian's determination and momentum and couldn't help but be stunned at the same time. Their eyes became doubtful. They were all wondering who the kid Jun Chujian and the 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley were talking about. Very good. The 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley saw that Jun Chujian was very strong and laughed loudly. Jun Chujian, you have some backbone. Unfortunately, in the face of absolute power, no matter how strong your backbone is, it's useless. Is that so? Jun Chujian smiled cold and said, then today I want to see if you, the 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley, really have this kind of strength. The 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley was just defeated by Jun Chujian, but he was still arrogant. It seemed that he still had something else to rely on. Jun Chujian, your stubbornness is making me impatient. At this moment, a clear voice suddenly sounded in the void. Then, a figure appeared, stepping on a sword at an extremely fast speed. Like a long rainbow, he instantly landed in front of the crowd and stood next to the 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley. When this figure in white landed, there was a mysterious aura flowing in the void. It seemed that this person's sword intent could faintly affect the structure of time and space. It was very strange. Nietian suddenly looked at that person and used his divine sense to sense it. His eyes couldn't help but tremble. The person looked very young, handsome, and dignified. Between his brows, there was a full sense of dominance and fierceness. His eyes were filled with arrogance and haughtiness. As he stood there, he was like an unsheathed, sharp sword, radiating a piercing aura. What shocked Nietian the most was that this swordsman's sword intent aura was extremely sharp. That kind of sharp aura could faintly be compared to Jun Chujian. Without a doubt, this swordsman's sword Dao realm was almost the same as Jun Chujian's. But this person was too young. He should be under 10,000 years old. This age was really the beginning stage for a godly state cultivator. It was hard to imagine how this person's sword Dao realm could be so strong. Chapter 2287. Young Master, hearing how the 7 disasters of the Valley of Ghosts addressed the man in white, the crowd's expression changed. All eyes were focused on the man in white. Judging from the respectful attitude, the 7 disasters of the Valley of Ghosts were showing towards the man in white. The latter's identity must be extremely prestigious. How is this possible? At this moment, the 3 legendary warriors sensed the man's strength. Their eyes trembled and they exclaimed in a low voice. The 3 of them were experts in the art of the sword, so they could naturally tell that the man in white was a peerless genius in the art of the sword. The man in white was so young, but he had already reached the intermediate stage of the godly sword physique. This level was the same as the 3 legendary warriors. In terms of aptitude, the sword will around him was even stronger than that of the 3 great legends. In the eyes of the 3 legends, he was a junior through and through, but his cultivation in the way of the sword was truly impressive. What is the relationship between you and that person? Jun Chujian was also shocked, but he could still maintain his calm. He locked his eyes on the man in white and asked, Gui Nu, you can leave first. Leave this to me. the man in white said, and signaled the 7 disasters of the Valley of Ghosts to leave. He called the 7 disasters of the Valley of Ghosts Gue Nu. Just this title alone showed how high his status was. Yes, young master. The 7 disasters of the Valley of Ghosts nodded and bowed respectfully. Then, the man in white looked at Jun Shujian and said, Jun Shujian, my name is Tian Xie Shaoqian. The person you are talking about is my teacher. Teacher knows that you will not obey so easily, so he asked me to come. Tian Xie Shaoqian was the name of the man in white. His voice was calm, but there was a sense of disgust in it. It was as if he did not put anyone in his eyes. Even his gaze was high and mighty. Although he called himself a junior, he did not show the slightest bit of respect towards Jun Shujian and called him by his name. He was very arrogant, as if there was nothing he could not solve. Tian Xie Shaoqian, looks like you are from the Tian Xie clan, Jun Shujian said in a deep voice. His eyes were dark as he forced a smile and said, You are very confident. Your Tianxie family has always been like this. However, I would like to know where your confidence comes from. You are indeed a genius in the way of the sword. Your sword Dao realm is enough to shock all the swordsmen here. But you're only an early paramount god. Forgive I for speaking bluntly, but if you want to fight with I, you will only be seeking your own defeat. Hearing Jun Shujian's words, the crowd nodded in agreement. Tianxie Shaoqian's sword Dao realm was indeed terrifying. Unfortunately, his martial Dao was much weaker than his Dao of the sword. He was only an early paramount god. Therefore, in terms of battle prowess, Tian Xie Shaoqian was not very strong. At least compared to the Ghost Valley's 7 calamities and the 3 legendary warriors, they were far inferior. Chuckling coldly, Tian Xie Shaoqian said, Jun Shujian, you're a legendary figure in the Tao of the Sword. Given your status, aren't you ashamed to fight me? Jun Shujian's brow furrowed, and he didn't know what to say. Considering his status, fighting Tian Xie Shaoqian was a bit of a bully. Jun Shujian, you should know that if I don't take that girl away today, you'll be the one to do it. Smiling strangely, Tian Xie Shaoqian said, Next time, Master will be the one to come. Jun Shujian's eyes narrowed. Tian Xie Shaoqian, don't tell me you wanted to hand her over just because you're here. If that's what you're thinking, then you're underestimating me. Tian Xie Shaoqian was confident that he could force Jun Shujian to hand over the girl without shedding a single drop of blood. Of course not. Tian Xie Shaoqian smiled and said loudly, Before I came, Master allowed me to act on my own once. So, I'm willing to give you a chance and make a bet with you. Bet? Jun Shujian's eyes flickered. How do you want to bet? At this moment, Tian Xie Shaoqian's lips twitched. Sweeping his gaze across everyone, he said, Let's bet on whether the new generation of swordsmen in your Sacred Heaven Sword Alliance are all trash. His voice was loud, and it reverberated in the air. Clearly, he wanted everyone to hear him. The crowd exploded in anger. This brat is too arrogant. He actually said that the young swordsmen in our Sacred Heaven Sword Alliance are all trash. Yeah, he's very talented, but he can't say that everyone else is trash, right? This person is from some Tian Xie clan. It doesn't sound like it's some good organization. As the crowd discussed, they looked at Tian Xie Shaoqian with uncontrollable anger. Swordsmen all had dignity and pride. How could they allow others to humiliate them? However, at this moment, Jun Shujian shouted and waved his hand to signal everyone to calm down, quiet. Then, he looked at Tian Xie Shaoqian with a fiery gaze. Tian Xie Shaoqian, you don't have to be so arrogant. Just tell me, how do you want to bet? He knew that Tian Xie Shaoqian was arrogant. However, Tian Xie Shaoqian's arrogance allowed him to see a chance. Unless it was absolutely necessary, he wouldn't start a war with the Tian Xie clan. Tian Xie Shaoqian was right. Even if he chased away the Ghost Valley's 7 disasters and the rest, he would not be able to do so. Even if he chased the 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley away, the next enemy would definitely be stronger. With his strength, even if he used the Sacred Heaven Sword Alliance, he would still be far from being able to contend against the Tian Xie clan. Very simple. Tian Xie Shaoqian sneered. I'll stand here and all the young swordsmen in the Sacred Heaven Sword Alliance can challenge me. Furthermore, as long as any of them can get within 100 meters of me, it'll be my loss." His voice was calm, but it was filled with incomparable arrogance. Arrogance that looked down on everything. The crowd was in an uproar again, and their emotions were boiling. "This brat is too arrogant. Who does he think he is? He actually dares to challenge all the young swordsmen in the Sacred Heaven Sword Alliance. His words are too arrogant. There are so many geniuses in our Sacred Heaven Sword Alliance. Is there no one who can get within 100 meters of him? This brat is too arrogant. In my opinion, he'll die a horrible death later." The indignant voices were extremely irritable. Everyone wanted to tear Tian, Xie, Xiaoqian apart alive. However, Jun Chujian's eyes suddenly trembled. He was very surprised and said, "Tian Xie Xiaoqian, are you serious? The swordsmen of my Tian Xie clan always keep their words." "Tian Xie Xiaoqian," replied Jun Chujian with a strange glint in his eyes. "Jun Chujian, listen carefully. If I lose, we'll leave this place immediately and never set foot in the Cloud Valley Sacred Heaven again. If I win, I'll take that girl away. Do you agree to this condition?" His high-pitched voice echoed in the air, sounding extremely arrogant. Jun Chujian's eyes suddenly narrowed, and a trace of hesitation flashed through his eyes. Tian Xie Xiaoqian definitely had something to rely on for his confidence. This made Jun Chujian have no choice but to be cautious. Chapter 2288. Excellent. Tianxia Xiaoqian laughed maniacally when he heard Jun Chujian's answer. "Jun Chujian, you'll soon realize that you've just made a foolish decision." His maniacal laughter was extremely arrogant. It was as if he was certain that he would win this bet. Jun Chujian's heart sank when he saw Tianxia Xiaoqian's confidence, and his expression darkened. He could guess that Tianxia Xiaoqian had something to rely on, but he had no choice but to agree to the bet. He had no other choice. If he took a step forward, he would die. If he took a step back, he would die too. Although the Sacred Heaven Sword League didn't have any peerless geniuses, there were a few who were strong enough to stand chance. Tianxia Xiaoqian's sword Dao was indeed shocking, but he was only an early-stage paramount god. With that in mind, Jun Chujian felt a little more at ease. Everyone's expressions changed at this moment. They were curious why Tianxia Xiaoqian would bet on the same person. Who was that girl he was talking about? It was as if that girl was more important than the Sacred Heaven Sword Catacomb. Jun Chujian let out a deep breath and retreated to the side of the three legendary swordsmen. "Alliance Lord." The three of them nodded in greeting. Jun Chujian didn't have a deep relationship with the three legendary swordsmen, but they still had to respect each other. Anya Minjia and the others were all focused on Tianxia Xiaoqian. They had come here for the Sacred Heaven Sword Seal, but they didn't expect to run into something even more shocking. The Ghost Valley's 7 calamities, Tianxia Xiaoqian and the Tianxia clan were people they had never heard of before. The crowd looked at Tianxia Xiaoqian with intense hostility. They wanted to see what Tianxia Xiaoqian had up his sleeve. Sword intent as the heavens, sword momentum as the earth. The sword has its own heaven and earth. At that moment, Tian Xie Xiaoqian smiled faintly and mumbled to himself. The sword intent around him was released crazily, surging in the space around him and instantly forming a world of sword intent. The moment the heavens and earth of sword intent appeared, the eyes of the crowd shuddered violently. The astonishment in their hearts was written all over their faces. The sword intent world around Tianxia Xiaoqian was not only filled with an extremely dense sword intent aura, but also emitted a massive space-time aura. What a strange aura! Nietian's eyes narrowed as he sensed the aura within the sword essence universe. Bloodline power, seal of time and space. At the same time, the fat cat's voice rang out. It was very shocking. Nietian was stunned for a moment, and then hurriedly asked, "Fat, what did you see?" "Nietian, this guy's bloodline power is very strong. It should be some kind of innate sword vein." Fat Cat exclaimed in shock. Nietian was stunned once more. He said in a deep voice, What exactly is this sword vein? Why does it have the aura of space-time? It seems to be some kind of sword vein that contains space-time attributes. Moreover, it can condense a space-time seal. Fat Cat's dark blue eyes flickered as he said, "This kind of space-time seal, combined with the power of a powerful sword intent, is really too powerful." Nietion's expression suddenly changed, and he could not hide the fear in his eyes. He finally understood why Tianxia Shaoqian was so confident that he dared to bet that no one could get within 100 meters of him. His sword essence universe was formed by the fusion of a space-time seal and a powerful sword intent. It was simply a space that made people despair. It was extremely rare to see someone who could break the space-time seal. On top of that, Tianxia Shaoqian had an extremely powerful sword intent, which made it even more difficult. The sword intent world around Tianxia Shaoqian was a forbidden area that was difficult to get close to. If even his sword intent world could not break through, how could it be possible to get within 100 meters of him? On the other side, Jun Shujian also sensed that something was wrong. He gasped and froze on the spot. He had never thought that Tianxia Shaoqian would have such a move. The three legends were also stunned, and they were so shocked that they could not speak. They were all peak swordsmen, so how could they not see the terror of Tianxia Shaoqian's sword intent world? Jun Shujian forced himself to calm down and said in his heart, "The world of sword intent around him is too terrifying. If it was purely based on strength, one would need to be at least a peak paramount god divine swordsman to have any hope. There is no divine swordsman among the younger generation of swordsmen in the Sacred Heaven Sword League." Thinking of this, Jun Shujian's expression was extremely gloomy. His resolute gaze instantly became slack, as if he had lost all faith. Tianxia Shaoqian's sword intent world could, of course, be broken through with strength, but the requirement for strength was too high. Jun Shujian thought of all the swordsmen in the Sacred Heaven Sword League, but he could not think of anyone. He felt that there was no hope at all. He even thought of Nietion. He felt that there was no hope for Nietion to break through Tianxia Shaoqian's sword intent world. "Jun Shujian, do you feel despair?" Tianxia Shaoqian's voice rang out, provoking Jun Shujian arrogantly. Arrogant. Before he could finish speaking, an angry voice rang out, and a figure appeared, slashing down with a sword at Tianxia Shaoqian. The moment the sword shadow landed, there was a muffled sound. Tianxia Shaoqian's sword intent world did not fluctuate at all. QL 11-inch, you're courting death. In the next moment, Tianxia Shaoqian roared. With a thought, sword intent surged out of his sword intent world, turning into a murderous sword shadow that whistled out. Bang! The sword shadow was like the wind, and the challenger didn't even have time to react before he was hit. His body instantly exploded, and blood splattered everywhere. What? Everyone was shocked by the sudden change in the situation. Tianxia Shaoqian's sword intent world was simply too terrifying. Not only was it indestructible, but it was also incredibly lethal. The challenger had been a late paramount god, and yet he had been killed just like that. Ants should have the awareness of ants. If you want to challenge me, Tianxia Shaoqian, then you'll have to pay the price. Tianxia Shaoqian laughed coldly, his voice dripping with blood. His attacks were vicious, and he wanted to intimidate everyone. He was using his actions to tell everyone that he, Tianxia Shaoqian, was not to be provoked. "Allow me." At this moment, another voice rang out, following which, a burly figure appeared and slashed down with his sword. Luo Eru. Nietion's face fell, and he called out the name in his heart. The challenger was none other than Luo Eru, who had fought him before. Luo Eru slashed down with his sword, but the effect was the same. He couldn't shake Tianxia Shaoqian's sword intent world in the slightest. Damn it! He roared angrily, and actually wanted to attack again. Die! However, at this moment, Tianxia Shaoqian smiled coldly, and a sword shadow suddenly shot out. Whoosh! The sword shadow flew past, and a glaring blood stench appeared in the air. Luo Eru's body was actually cut into two at the waist. Hiss. This incomparably bloody scene caused everyone to suck in a breath of cold air, and their expressions were extremely shocked. Luo Eru was an extremely tyrannical existence among the younger generation of the Sacred Heavensword Alliance. Even he was instantly killed by Tianxia Shaoqian, so one could imagine how strong the latter was. Eru. In the next moment, a wail rang out. Following that, a tower-like figure appeared in midair. Chapter 2289. Luo Elong's figure appeared in midair. His eyes were bloodshot, and his aura was violent like a ferocious beast. Luo Elong. The crowd looked at the towering silhouette, and their eyes trembled as they exclaimed in unison. Luo Elong had a great reputation in the Sacred Heavensword Union. He was definitely one of the best in the younger generation. His appearance not only represented his anger, but also gave everyone hope. When Yetian saw Luo Elong, his eyes slightly narrowed, and an indescribable sense of foreboding arose in his heart. He had to admit that Luo Elong was strong, especially his terrifying martial physique, which was comparable to a beast. However, the person he was facing right now was the mysterious Tianxia Shaoqian. Without the slightest hesitation, Nietian took a step forward and shouted, "Luo Elong, don't be rash." However, Luo Elong was completely engulfed by hatred. His bloodshot eyes stared at Tianxia Shaoqian, wishing he could tear the latter into pieces. His second brother had just been killed by the other party. How could his desire for revenge not be strong? Bastard, pay for my second brother's life. Luo Elong completely disregarded Nietian's warning. With a loud roar, sword intent gushed out from his entire body, condensing into a frightening sword shadow around him. Its aura was extremely violent. Oh! When Tianxia Shaoqian saw this, he laughed mockingly and said, "Finally, someone with some strength. Interesting. Bastard, I'll tear you apart." Luo Elong roared. His figure was like a berserk beast as he charged toward Tianxia Shaoqian. His aura was extremely strong, like that of a ferocious beast. Relying on his tyrannical martial physique and terrifying sword intent, he smashed toward Tianxia Shaoqian. The expressions of Jun, Chu Jian, and the rest changed when they saw this scene. Luo Elong was someone who didn't care about his own life. His stance was as if he wanted to perish together with Tianxia Shaoqian. Everyone's eyes trembled and their expressions were filled with fear. They didn't know what would happen next. It's just a barbaric bull. Good timing. Tianxia Shaoqian stood at his original spot, his lips curling into a cold smile. His killing intent was heavy. In the next moment, Luo Elong's figure arrived. A terrifying sword shadow surrounded him and heavily collided with Tianxia Shaoqian's sword world. Bang! With a muffled explosion, Luo Elong's figure actually fell into the sword world. This scene was like a sharp sword stabbing into a huge block of ice. However, Luo Elong had only taken one step forward. After that, his body seemed to have sunk into an iron plate, and it was difficult for him to take another step forward. "Luo Elong, come back." Nietian couldn't help but shout when he saw this scene. However, Luo Elong completely ignored his cold voice. With a single breath, he took a step forward with great difficulty, and his figure actually advanced a little. The eyes of the crowd trembled, and their hearts were filled with shock. Luo Elong was truly not afraid at all. He swore to fight Tianxia Shaoqian head-on. "Luo Elong, that's enough. Stop." On the other side, Jun Chujian also shouted, his expression filled with grief. How could he not see that Luo Elong had already reached his limit? His strength was only so strong, and it was impossible for him to approach Tianxia Shaoqian anymore. QL11, however, Luo Elong didn't care at all. He roared and stared coldly at Tianxia Shaoqian. "I'm going to tear him apart." The enemy who killed his brother was right in front of him, and he was only a few hundred meters away. However, he couldn't get close to him. This kind of pain was indescribable. "Ant! Trash!" At this moment, Tianxia Shaoqian coldly laughed. "In front of me, only death awaits you." As the sound of his cold voice faded, Tian Xie Shaoqian's body trembled. Boom! Instantly, a violent sword intent appeared, shooting towards Luo Yilong. Bang! In the next instant, a muffled sound rang out. Luo Yilong's figure was flung backwards, and the sword shadows around him shattered into pieces. Not good. Almost at the same time, a voice rang out. After that, a figure appeared, flying towards Luo Yilong. Nie Tian. Jun Shujian's eyes trembled as he saw that figure clearly. It was none other than Nie Tian. Nie Tian slammed out with his palm while in midair. A ball of white light appeared, and with the speed of lightning, it enveloped Luo Yilong, following which a pair of astral soul wings appeared behind his back, and he instantly caught Luo Yilong, stabilizing his footing. Although his speed was extremely fast, he was still a step too slow. Luo Yilong's entire body was drenched in blood, and his aura was extremely weak. Without hesitation, Nie Tian instantly unleashed the power of the earth vein source, and boundless life force flowed into Luo Yilong's body. Pooh! Luo Yilong's body trembled slightly, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes opened once again. Nie Tian. When he saw the face in front of him clearly, he spoke softly. Don't speak. Nie Tian drew in a deep breath and infused more life force into Luo Yilong's body, stabilizing his aura. Nie Tian, how is he? At this moment, Jun Shujin's figure appeared, and he asked anxiously. His life is no longer in danger, but he still needs some time to fully recover. Nie Tian furrowed his brows as he spoke in a heavy tone. Luckily, he acted in time and used the extreme yang battle armor to block the sword intent for Luo Yilong. Coupled with the powerful life force from the earth vein source, he managed to save Luo Yilong's life. If he was a step slower, Luo Yilong would have died without a doubt. Tianxia Shaoqian's strength was too strange and too terrifying. Even someone as strong as Luo Yilong was unable to withstand the violent sword intent. It's good that he's not dead. Jun Shujian could finally relax after seeing that Luo Yilong's aura had stabilized. At this moment, Roten and the rest of the sect leaders were all in closed-door seclusion. Luo Eru had already died a horrible death. If Luo Yilong were to die as well, Jun Shujian really did not know how to tell Roten about it. Damn it, he's not dead. Tianxia Shaoqian stood there, but his face suddenly darkened, and his eyes became extremely cold. He had not expected that Luo Yilong was not dead. The next moment, his eyes suddenly changed, and he locked his gaze on Nie Tian. He roared, Brat, who are you? Luo Yilong did not die, of course, because his martial body was very strong. But the more important reason was obviously Nie Tian. If not for Nie Tian, Luo Yilong would have been a corpse. Tianxia Shaoqian's plan was to kill every single person who challenged him. But now there was an accident. This was intolerable. The next person to challenge you. Nie Tian suddenly raised his head and stared at Tianxia Shaoqian without the slightest fear. He spoke in a cold tone. Nie Tian, you... Jun Shujian couldn't help but be stunned when he heard Nie Tian's words. Nie Tian wasn't a member of the Sacred Heavensward Alliance, so he could have stayed out of this matter. But now, he actually took the initiative to challenge Tianxia Shaoqian, which was tantamount to inviting trouble for himself. The eyes of the crowd were also stunned for a moment, and then they released a blazing intent. Nie Tian is the one who activated the Sacred Heavensward seal. He's going to challenge this insolent fellow. Lord Nie Tian once defeated Luo Yilong. He can definitely defeat this fellow from the Tianxia family. Lord Nie Tian is the last hope of our Sacred Heavensward Alliance. The crowd discussed with shock and excitement in their eyes. Chapter 2290. Tianxia Shaoqian looked at Nie Tian with disbelief in his eyes. He never thought that the person who would activate the Sacred Heavensward seal would be Nie Tian. This was completely different from what he had expected. He originally thought that the person who activated the Sacred Heavensward seal must be the person he was thinking of, the person he wanted to take away today. However, the reality before him was completely different from what he had expected. He couldn't accept it at this moment. How is this possible? How is this possible? Why are you the one who activated the sacred heaven sword seal? Tianxia Shaoqian stared at Niet Tian in astonishment, and his expression slowly turned into one of anger. Why can't I be the one who activated the sacred heaven sword seal? Niet Tianling smiled and waved his hand to signal Jun Chujian and Luo Yilong to step back. His eyes slowly became determined. Next, it was time for him to challenge Tianxia Shaoqian. Niet Tian, are you confident? Fat Cat's worried voice sounded. No. Niet Tian smiled bitterly. Do I still have a way out now? Do I have to watch this guy take Jun ouching away? That little girl? Fat Cat was stunned for a moment before he reacted. You're saying that the person they want to take away is that little girl? That's my guess. It shouldn't be wrong. Niet Tian smiled with a calm expression. He had already guessed it when he heard the conversation between the 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley and Jun Chujian. The person that the 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley and Tianxia Shaoqian wanted to take away was most likely Jun Ouching. The 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley mentioned a girl from 18 years ago. This information perfectly matched with Jun Ouching. Jun Ouching should be around 18 years old, and her talent was exceptionally high. Coupled with Jun Chujian's attitude, Niet Tian basically concluded that the person Tianxia Shaoqian wanted to take away was Jun Ouching. He couldn't think of anyone else besides Jun Ouching that was worth Jun Chujian betting the entire Sacred Heaven Sword Union and even the entire land of the Forsaken. As a matter of fact, Niet Tian wasn't confident in his ability to defeat Tian Xie Shaoqian. After all, Tian Xie Shaoqian's sword intent was too strange. He didn't have any other choice but to risk his life. Fortunately, he only needed to get within 100 meters of Tianxia Shaoqian and didn't need to defeat him. This condition was already very generous. If Niet Tian and Tian Xie Shaoqian were to fight to the death right now, Niet Tian would definitely lose. Although Tian Xie Shaoqian was an early paramount god like Niet Tian, his sword cultivation was at the middle divine sword body. Tianxia Shaoqian was an early-stage paramount god, just like Niet Tian, but his sword Dao was in the mid-stage divine sword body. You're just a nameless ant. You're not worthy of activating the sacred heaven sword seal. Tianxia Shaoqian looked at Niet Tian coldly, as if he was infuriated. He roared like a madman. Niet Tian narrowed his eyes and sneered. It's not up to you to decide whether I'm worthy or not. No matter how you look at me, I have to solemnly tell you that I was the one who activated the sacred heaven evil seal. If you're not convinced, feel free to express it. His sneer was full of mockery. The anger in Tianxia Shaoqian's eyes intensified. Sword intent surged from his body, and he wanted nothing more than to rush forward and tear Niet Tian to shreds. However, he didn't do so. It wasn't time yet. Brat, since you've activated the sacred heaven sword seal, then I, Tianxia Shaoqian, would like to see just how talented you are. Tianxia Shaoqian's voice was cold. He wanted to provoke Niet Tian into challenging him, and then use his sword intent to kill him. Don't provoke me. How can Niet Tian not know what Tianxia Shaoqian was trying to do? He sneered, I'll challenge you right now, and I'll definitely win. He would definitely win. The 4 words resounded in everyone's ears like metal and stone. Niet Tian, Niet Tian, Niet Tian. Everyone was in high spirits, shouting Niet Tian's name like a tsunami. Luo Yilong had suffered a crushing defeat at the hands of Tianxia Shaoqian. So Niet Tian was now the Sacred Heaven Sword Union's only hope. A bunch of ants cheering for a piece of trash. How can the scene be so ridiculous? Tianxia Shaoqian sneered with a contemptuous expression. Whether I'm trash or not, you'll know very soon. Niet Tian smiled faintly, his eyes calm and firm. Then a violent sword intent surged out of his body, and a terrifying sword aura rose around him. His figure was as sharp as a sword as he stood in the void. He directly used the divine demon power to condense the divine demon sword intent. A dark aura surged out of his body, as if a demon had descended. Sensing Niet Tian's sword intent, the crowd instantly quieted down. Their gazes trembled slightly, and they didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Niet Tian is so strong. In the distance, The three legendary swordsmen's expressions changed at the same time. Anya Minjia, Guangwu Fengyin, and Sikong Xuani had all seen Yetian before. But now, they truly understood how terrifying Yetian was. They couldn't imagine that in just 2 months, Yetian's strength had grown to such a terrifying level. They were all pinnacle swordsmen. Of course, they could sense that Yetian's combat strength was many times stronger than it was 2 months ago. Not only did Yetian's martial arts strength increase, but his swordsmanship had also improved. Such a rapid rate of growth was insane. Interesting. Tianxia Shaoqian sensed the sharpness of Yetian's sword intent, and his lips curled into a strange smile. He said coldly, "I couldn't tell. You're stronger than that blockhead, just now." He didn't expect Yetian's sword intent to be even more terrifying than Luo Yilong's. One should know that Yetian, be it martial arts or swordsmanship, was below Luo Yilong. But his sword intent was stronger than Luo Yilong's. This undoubtedly meant that his sword intent talent was leagues ahead of Luo Yilong. Human sword, star slash. At this moment, Yetian's lips curled into a cold smile. With a flicker of his eyes, his figure dashed forward like an arrow leaving the bow, heading straight for Tianxia Shaoqian. So fast, everyone's eyes flickered. They couldn't help but exclaim when they felt the streak of light flying past. One had to admit that, other than the sharpness of his sword intent, Yetian's speed was also extremely shocking. QL 11-inch, good timing. Facing Yetian's all-out sword strike, Tianxia Shaoqian let out a wild laugh as the heaven and earth of sword intent around him suddenly expanded. Boom, boom, boom. In the blink of an eye, Tianxia Shaoqian's sword intent heaven and earth expanded several times. The sword intent space was originally only 300 to 400 meters wide, but now it covered a few thousand meters of space. Yetian's eyes trembled slightly in midair. He could feel that the sword intent surrounding Tianxia Shaoqian had not only expanded, but the space-time aura within it had also become stronger. Without a doubt, Tianxia Shaoqian had strengthened the space-time seal within the sword intent space. It seemed like Tianxia Shaoqian was serious and treated Yetian as a real opponent. Chapter 2291. Little Fat Cat seemed to have sensed something and cried out, its face full of panic. Yetian's gaze trembled slightly, but it became firm in an instant. He had already drawn his sword like an arrow, leaving the bow. There was no chance for him to stop. If he chose to stop now, he would be courting death. Little trash, come and die obediently. Tianxia Shaoqian looked at Yetian with a cold smile and said arrogantly, "An ant like you can activate the sacred heaven sword seal? What a joke." Cold words of disdain resounded in the air. Tianxia Shaoqian stared at Yetian coldly, as if he was looking at a dead man. In his opinion, Yetian was already a dead man. As long as Yetian came within 1,000 meters of him, he would definitely die. Boom! Hum! In the next moment, Yetian's figure arrived. The sword shadows fell down and landed on Tianxia Shaoqian's world of sword intent. There was a loud bang, followed by a low muffled sound, as if the space was humming. Under countless gazes, the terrifying sword shadow fell straight down and sank deep into the world of sword intent. Everyone's eyes narrowed and their expressions became sluggish. Their hearts jumped to their throats and they didn't even blink. Yetian was really powerful. The sword shadows around him seemed to have the power to tear apart heaven and earth. They actually tore apart Tianxia Shaoqian's world of sword intent. This was the first time that Yetian had used the 3 reversing sword styles, human sword severing stars. Combined with the celestial devil sword intent, the might it could unleash was beyond imagination. In midair, the divine demon sword shadow pierced deep into the world of sword intent. On the blade, the sword intent was strong and the sword ray was dazzling. The sharp sword shadow instantly closed in on Tianxia Shaoqian. 1,000 meters. 500 meters, 100 meters. Everyone watched as the sword shadow was about to hit Tianxia Shaoqian. Their nerves were stretched to the extreme, and even their breathing stopped. There's hope. Jun Chujian and the others saw this scene, and their eyes trembled with excitement. They couldn't hide their joy. QL 11-inch Nie Tian is so strong. Luo Yilong's expression changed, and he couldn't help but shout. He had just challenged Tian Xie Shaoqian, so he naturally knew how strong the latter sword world was. Nie Tian was actually able to get so close to Tianxia Shaoqian and was even about to injure him. It was truly terrifying. Luo Yilong was ashamed of his inferiority. Little brat, do you think my young master will be defeated so easily? On the other side, the 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley smiled cold, with a strange smile. He wasn't worried about Nie Tian Shaoqian at all. Instead, he was certain that Nie Tian Shaoqian would die a horrible death soon. Little trash, you're really courting death. The corner of Tianxia Shaoqian's lips twitched as he let out an evil laugh. His body trembled as a surge of space-time energy surged out and surged into the sword-intent space. Boom! Crack, crack, crack. The next moment, the power of time and space stirred up a storm of time and space. That sword shadow was struck by the space-time storm and directly shattered. Oh no! Nie Tian suddenly felt that something was amiss. His expression changed and a pair of astral soul wings appeared on his back. He suddenly flapped and wanted to retreat. Unfortunately, he was one step too late. Boom! The space-time storm was like a raging dragon, instantly enveloping Nie Tian and sucking him in. The crowd was startled by the sudden scene, and then they cried out in surprise. The space-time storm was like a dragon breaking out of the abyss, shooting up into the sky. Nie Tian's figure was completely enveloped by the space-time storm, and no one could see his shadow at all. Chi chi chi. High up in the sky, ear-piercing sounds could be heard. The crowd could only see the space-time storm, but they couldn't see Nie Tian. Ha ha ha. A little trash dares to challenge me? You're really courting death. Tianxia Shaoqian laughed wildly and arrogantly said, caught in the space-time storm. I'm afraid he's already turned into meat paste. The crowd heard Tianxia Shaoqian's words, and their eyes widened in shock. Nie Tian was dead. Nie Tian. On the other side, a roar sounded. It was actually Jun Chujian. Jun Chujian and Bai Feiyang were like angry lions, about to go crazy in the next moment. The space-time storm was too strong. Even though Nie Tian's martial body was strong, he couldn't withstand it. The space-time storm was a space-time energy that could tear everything apart. Anya Minjia and the others were also stunned. The 3 legendary swordsmen had a deep connection with Nie Tian. Anya Minjia and Guangwu Fengyan both wanted to kill Nie Tian. As for Sikong Xuani, on the surface, he seemed to be protecting Nie Tian, but in reality, no one knew what his motive was. But now, Nie Tian's sudden and tragic death caught them off guard. Nie Tian died just like that. Anya Minjia was the first to react, and he was shocked. He had spent a lot of effort to kill Nie Tian. Nie Tian's sudden death at someone else's hands gave him a very strange feeling. He wasn't happy at all. Instead, he felt an inexplicable sadness. Guangwu Fengyan and Sikong Xuani's expressions were also ugly. The crowd was also stunned and couldn't say a word for a long time. Nie Tian was their last hope, but it was shattered just like that. I've said it before, those who challenge me will have to pay the price. At this moment, Tianxia Shaoqian started laughing maniacally. His arrogance was at its peak, and his eyes were filled with disdain. Jun Chujian, even this brat who broke the sacred heaven sword seal, died in my hands. Who else in your sacred heaven sword union dares to challenge me? Tianxia Shaoqian looked at Jun Chujian and shouted provocatively. Jun Chujian's eyes were filled with shock, and he was in so much pain that he couldn't speak. Tianxia Shaoqian. However, at this moment, a deep voice resounded in the sky. The voice wasn't loud, but it resounded in everyone's ears like a clap of thunder, shocking them. Nie Tian. Everyone exclaimed, and their eyes instantly lit up as they looked at the space-time storm in the sky. This figure was very familiar. It was clearly Nie Tian's voice. Nie Tian was still alive. In an instant, everyone regained their senses, and their despairing faces instantly turned into joy. Nie Tian. Jun Chujin's heart trembled when he heard this voice, and two streams of tears flowed out from the corners of his eyes. Anya Minjia and the other two were also shocked as they stared at the space-time storm. Nie Tian was trapped in the space-time storm, but he was still alive. Impossible. Tianxia Shaoqian was stunned for a few seconds before he finally reacted. He roared as if he was about to go crazy. He couldn't believe that Nie Tian could survive a space-time storm. In the next moment, a deep voice responded to Tianxia Shaoqian, "Nothing is impossible." Then, the space-time storm trembled, and a crack appeared. A figure walked out from it. It was Nie Tian. Chapter 2292. Nie Tian stood high up in the sky without a single wound on his body. His aura was still as sharp as ever. How is this possible? Upon seeing Nie Tian's face, the crowd went blank, their hearts filled with astonishment. Nie Tian had just fallen into the space-time storm, but he was not injured at all. Was his martial constitution that powerful? Everyone was well aware of how powerful the space-time storm was. Even if the space-time storm created by Tianxia Shaoqian was not as powerful as the storm contained in the space-time storm, it was still very terrifying. Nie Tian walked out of the space-time storm unscathed. This was too strange. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Tianxia Shaoqian's eyes suddenly trembled as he roared. Your martial constitution can't be strong enough to resist the space-time storm. This is impossible. Nie Tian looked at Tianxia Shaoqian playfully and said, Tianxia Shaoqian, it's not that my martial constitution is too strong, it's that your space-time storm is too weak. Also, do you think that you're the only one who can release space-time energy? What do you mean? Tianxia Shaoqian's eyes narrowed. He immediately understood and exclaimed, You can also release space-time energy? You're not too stupid. Nie Tianling laughed and took a step forward. As his figure landed, the aura around him surged again. His sword intent was extremely sharp and murderous. He wanted to attack again and challenge Tianxia Shaoqian. But this time, he had absolute confidence that he could get within 100 meters of Tianxia Shaoqian. He even felt that he could hurt Tianxia Shaoqian. The crowd's expressions were fiery as they exclaimed, Nie Tian is going to challenge this guy again. Lord Nie Tian is indeed the one who broke the sacred heaven sword seal. He's not afraid of the space-time storm. Ha ha ha. This arrogant guy will definitely lose when he meets Nie Tian. Everyone was wild with joy and had absolute confidence in Nie Tian. At this moment, Jun Chujin was sweating profusely. He couldn't understand what kind of person Nie Tian was. Anya Minjia frowned and thought to himself, Nie Tian, how many more secrets are you hiding? Nie Tian's secret was not known to outsiders. Even he himself, and even little Fat Cat, did not fully understand. Fat Cat was still wondering how Nie Tian was able to comprehend the Saint Heaven defying sword. Human sword, star slashing. In the next moment, the sword aura around Nie Tian's body surged to the extreme again. Around his body, sword will surged, blood chi sword, and the power of the fiend god surged ceaselessly. The space was filled with a terrifying fiend god aura. Boom! Then, he slashed out with the star heavenly slash in his hand. The fiend god sword will instantly condensed, and under the stimulation of the swordsman's blood chi, a terrifying sword aura burst out. In the void, a blood-colored sword shadow was condensed. It was nearly 10,000 meters long, and it poured down like a blood-colored waterfall. What was even more strange was that outside the blood-colored sword shadow, there were strange flames surging in the void, as if even the space was about to be burned. So powerful! The crowd exclaimed, and their expressions were extremely shocked. This is... Jun Chujin and the others were also shocked, and their expressions suddenly changed. That flame actually carries the aura of space-time. On the other side, the 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley could no longer maintain their calm, and their eyes trembled. They actually felt a strong space-time aura from Nie Tian's sword shadow. That's right. QL 11 in Nie Tian's sword will. There was the power of the chaotic flame. The chaotic flame was formed by the fusion of the boundary of a universe and the heart of nothingness. The boundary of a universe could create space-time, so it was not surprising that the chaotic flame carried the aura of space-time. At this moment, the crowd finally understood why Nyetian was able to stay safe in the space-time storm. Nyetian relied on the chaotic flame to resist the strangulation of the space-time storm. Without the chaotic flame, even if his martial body was strong, he would still be minced into meat paste by the space-time storm. Fortunately, Tian Xie Shaoqian's space-time storm was not very strong, and the chaotic flame could still resist it. Boom! Nyetian's figure moved, and while he was still in midair, his body was immediately ignited with the chaotic flame. He rode on the blood-colored sword shadow, and like a shocking ray of light, he attacked Tian Xie Shaoqian. In an instant, Tian Xie Shaoqian felt that something was wrong, and his eyes trembled. Then, the 9 yuan meridians in his body began to operate crazily, and the world of sword will around him became stronger. Unfortunately, his strength had reached its limit, and he could no longer release a stronger world of sword will. Rumble! In the next moment, the blood-colored sword shadow fell, and directly broke through the world of sword will. The chaotic flame on the blade of the sword shone brightly, and the fire raged. No! Tian Xie Shaoqian felt that something was wrong, and he actually screamed. In panic, he released the space-time power again, and a space-time storm appeared, attacking the blood-colored sword shadow. However, under the protection of the chaotic flame, the space-time storm could not destroy the sword shadow instantly. In the space, ear-piercing sounds kept coming out, and the light and the flame became stronger and stronger. Tian Xie Shaoqian felt that the sword will in front of him was getting stronger, and his eyes revealed an uncontrollable fear. At this moment, he felt the aura of death approaching. At the same time, Nyetian's figure was approaching him nonstop. Boom! 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 In the world of sword will, there was a continuous rumbling sound, and it was already on the verge of collapse. You're very arrogant, aren't you? Nyetian's lips twitched coldly, and he said in a deep voice, I'll kill you. Let's see how arrogant you can be. At this moment, the killing intent in his heart was very strong. Tian Xie Shaoqian had killed so many people from the Sacred Heaven Sword Union, and even Luo Era died in his hands. It was not unreasonable for Nyetian to want revenge. I admit defeat. Tian Xie Shaoqian felt the approaching killing intent, and he immediately screamed in fear. Admit defeat? Nie Tianling laughed, and then he said in a deep voice, It's too late. He had already made up his mind to kill Tian Xie Shaoqian, regardless of whether he admitted defeat or not. Don't you dare hurt my young master. At this moment, there was a roar in the air, and then a black sword light appeared, directly blasting towards Nyetian. Danger, dodge! Fat Cat's voice instantly sounded, reminding Nyetian. Nyetian felt the heavy, killing intent, and he glared at Tian Xie Shaoqian with hatred. He retracted the sword aura around him, and the astral soul wings on his back flapped, and he directly dodged 1,000 meters to the side. The black sword light whistled past, and the black light brushed past him, only a few meters away. PFFF. The sharp sword aura swept past, and a glaring wound actually appeared on Nyetian's chest, and blood instantly flowed out. He avoided the black light head-on, but he was affected by the aftershock. If he was hit by this sword light head-on, he would definitely not have a corpse left. The one who attacked was the Ghost Valley's 7 disasters, a swordsman even more terrifying than the 3 legends. Brat, I'll kill you. At this moment, Tian Xie Shaoqian's voice sounded. His figure moved, and a long sword appeared in his hand. He suddenly stabbed out, directly attacking Nyetian. Chapter 2293. Die! Tian Xie Shaoqian was in midair as he stabbed out with his sword towards Nyetian. The sword shadow was like lightning, extremely fast and murderous. Be careful! The crowd was startled by the sudden scene and immediately cried out in alarm. Everything happened in the blink of an eye, and there was no time for the crowd to react. Nie Tian broke through Tian Xie Shaoqian's sword intent world and forced the latter to admit defeat. But Nie Tian was very ruthless. Even if Tian Xie Shaoqian admitted defeat, he still wanted to kill him. Nie Tian's action could be said to be extremely ruthless, but it could not be said to be shameless. Because this challenge did not state that one could not kill after admitting defeat. Moreover, Tian Xie Shaoqian was too bloodthirsty and killed so many people. This was what truly angered Nie Tian. If he had shown mercy to those who challenged him before, Nie Tian would not have killed him. But at the moment of life and death, the Ghost Valley 7 disasters actually made a move and immediately reversed the situation. What was even more unexpected was that Tian Xie Shaoqian actually turned the tables and wanted to kill Nie Tian. What he did was very shameless. Because Nie Tian was injured by the Ghost Valley 7 disasters first, Tian Xie Shaoqian took advantage of him. Oh no! Jun Chujian's eyes trembled as he cried out. Everything happened too suddenly, and he did not have time to react at all. He did not expect Nie Tian to be so ruthless and insist on killing Tian Xie Shaoqian. He did not expect the Ghost Valley 7 disasters to suddenly make a move. It was too much for an expert like the Ghost Valley 7 disasters to make a move against Nie Tian. At this moment, Jun Chujian wanted to save Nie Tian, but it was too late. Tian Xie Shaoqian's attack was extremely ruthless, and he obviously wanted to kill Nie Tian with one sword. His sword Dao realm was already very terrifying and far beyond Nie Tian. Previously, he almost died in the hands of Nie Tian because he was completely in a defensive state. If it was a head-on battle, Nie Tian was definitely not his match. Go to hell! Young Master Tian Xie roared. His entire face turned bloody and hideous like a demon. The terrifying sword image was over 10,000 meters long. It was like an enraged dragon as it surged towards Nie Tian. Nie Tian's expression changed when he felt that aura. His current strength was too weak. Even if he resisted with all his might, it would be impossible for him to block this sword. In an instant, countless thoughts flashed through his mind. He could summon the Golden Lion and the Pichio from the 9 Superbs, but these two divine beasts were not fully developed. If he were to come out now, he would be courting death. How can Nie Tian let the two divine beasts die for nothing? Let's fight! In the next moment, he roared furiously in his heart while the sword insight in his entire body surged and rose violently to the limit, and the vital blood in his entire body surged and surged, causing the entire expanse of space to be covered in a bloody aura. QL 11-inch earth sword, moon swallowing. The corner of his mouth trembled as he murmured. Nie Tian forcefully gathered all his sword insight, intending to use the earth sword swallowing the moon. At this moment, even if he used a human sword to slash the stars, it would be useless. There is no hope of using the sky sword defying Yang. Only the earth sword swallowing the moon could perfectly unleash its power. Perhaps it would give him a chance of survival. Nie Tian, let's go. However, at this moment, a cool voice suddenly rang in Nie Tian's ears. Then, he felt a space-time vortex appear behind him. Jun ouching. His eyes trembled as he took a step back and stepped into the space-time vortex. Boom! In the next instant, the life-threatening sword image whizzed past, but it missed. Nie Tian's figure disappeared into thin air. What happened? The crowd was stunned as they stared at the scene in the air with their mouths agape. Nie Tian was about to be hit by the sword image, but it inexplicably disappeared. Tian Xie Shaoqian's figure suddenly stopped, his eyes trembling. In the next moment, he seemed to have thought of something. His expression suddenly changed as he said that girl. She finally appeared. Then, he suddenly turned around and looked behind him. Two figures stood there, Nie Tian and Jun ouching. At the most critical moment, the person who saved Nie Tian was none other than Jun ouching. Nie Tian, are you all right? Jun ouching saw Nie Tian's chest dripping with blood and asked anxiously. I'm fine. Nie Tian smiled faintly, his pale face revealing a smile. The wound on his chest was caused by the 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley. It was just a flesh wound, nothing serious. Needless to say, Jun Aoqing's appearance was very timely. If she had come half a second later, Nie Tian's fate would be unknown. Nie Tian did not have the confidence to use the sword just now. It was just a gamble at the moment of life and death. Jun Aoqing's sword intent was really special. She could create a space-time vortex with a casual swing of her sword. It was a great rescue technique. Nie Tian, who is he? Seeing that Nie Tian's life was not in danger, Jun Aoqing's gaze fell on Tian Xie Shaoqian. She frowned and asked. Obviously, Jun Aoqing did not know who Tian Xie Shaoqian was. At this moment, Jun Shujian's figure took a step forward and came to Nie Tian and Jun Aoqing's side. He said, Aoqing, why are you here? I'm a little worried about you, so I came. Jun Aoqing said nervously. It turned out that Jun Shujian had personally warned her not to appear no matter what. The reason why Jun Shujian did not appear was because he had gone to make arrangements for Jun Aoqing. However, he did not expect that Jun Aoqing would still come. Alliance leader, they're really here for Jun Aoqing. Nie Tian frowned and asked when he saw Jun Shujian's reaction. Although he had already guessed it, he was still surprised to see it confirmed by Jun Shujian. Yes. Jun Shujian nodded. There was an unconcealable worry between his brows. Nie Tian's gaze swept across Jun Shujian and his face darkened. It seemed that Jun Aoqing was hiding a big secret. The last member of the Yuming family has finally appeared. At this moment, Tian Xie Shaoqian's cold eyes were fixed on Jun Aoqing. This girl really is from the Yuming family. On the other side, the 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley also spoke with a cold and surprised look. They had come to the Cloud Valley Holy Sky for Jun Aoqing. Yuming family? Nie Tian's eyes narrowed when he heard Tian Xie Shaoqian and the 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley. It seemed that Jun Aoqing was not from the Jun family, but from a Yuming family. Tian Xie Shaoqian was from the Tian Xie family, while Jun Aoqing was from the Yuming family. Tian Xie Shaoqian and Jun Aoqing seemed to be closely related. Grandpa, what are they talking about? What's the Yuming family? Jun Aoqing was confused. She could not understand what Tian Xie Shaoqian and the 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley were talking about. The crowd was also stunned. They all focused their attention on Jun Aoqing. At this moment, everyone understood that Tian Xie Shaoqian and the others were here for Jun Aoqing. Jun Aoqing's body. What secrets were hidden? In Tian Xie Shaoqian's eyes, Jun Aoqing was more important than the sacred Heaven Sword tomb. At this time, Tian Xie Shaoqian suddenly sneered. His dark eyes swept over Jun Shujian and Jun Aoqing, and he said with an evil face, Jun Shujian, it seems that you haven't told her who she is. I think she will be surprised if she knows who she is. Chapter 2294. Jun Shujian stared coldly at Tian Xie Shaoqian with murderous intent. Nie Tian frowned as he glanced at Jun Shujian. His expression changed. From Jun Shujian's eyes, he saw not only murderous intent, but also panic. It was as if Jun Shujian was hiding something and did not want Tian Xie Shaoqian to say it. Jun Shujian, are you afraid? Tian Xie Shaoqian ignored Jun Shujian's threat and snickered. He stared at Jun Aoqing and said, there are some things that this girl will find out sooner or later. If she finds out now, perhaps her hatred for you will lessen. Then, Tian Xie Shaoqian turned to Jun Shujian and provoked, tell me, am I right? Shut up. Jun Shujian's expression darkened as his eyes flickered. He was like an enraged beast that was about to go berserk at any moment. Nie Tian's heart sank when he saw this. From Jun Shujian's reaction, he was indeed hiding something. And these things were related to Jun Aoqing. Jun Shujian's reaction was agitated and angry, but at the same time, he could not hide his fear. Nie Tian couldn't help but frown as he thought to himself, what is it that made Lord Sect Master react like that? Young Master, enough. Tian Xie Shaoqian wanted to say something, but was stopped by the 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley. The 7 disasters could tell that Jun Shujian was in a state of rage. If Tian Xie Shaoqian continued, he would be forcing Jun Shujian to kill him. Jun Shujian's strength was obvious. If he wanted to kill, the 7 disasters of the Ghost Valley would not be able to stop him. F***CK off. Get out of cloud, valley, holy sky. In the next moment, Jun Chujian roared like a mad lion. Sword intent surged from his body. Tian Xie, Xiaoqian's expression changed. He did not want to leave just like that. He had already met Jun Aoqing, the person he wanted to take away. His target was already close at hand, and he was unwilling to give up now. However, he had already lost the bet. Nie Tian almost killed him just now, forcing him to admit defeat. Young master, let's leave first. The Ghost Valley's 7 disasters looked at Tian Xie, Xiaoqian, and whispered. They had already lost the bet, so there was no point in staying here any longer. Even if Jun Aoqing was right in front of them, there was nothing they could do. Still not going to scram? Just then, Jun Chujian roared out once more. The sword will within his body had reached its peak. It was like a sharp sword that was about to be unsheathed to kill at any moment. Tian Xie, Xiaoqian wasn't scared by Jun Chujian. His eyes flickered as he shouted, "Little girl from the Yuming family, do you really not want to know your true identity?" What are you talking about? Jun Aoqing's beautiful eyes shone with tears, and her voice was trembling. She wasn't an idiot. Of course, she could guess something. It was obvious that she wasn't Jun Chujian's biological granddaughter, but someone from the Yuming family that Tian Xie Xiaoqian mentioned. This sudden turn of events was hard for her to accept. At this moment, Nie Tian's brows were tightly furrowed. He had guessed more things. Jun Chujian must have something important that he was hiding from Jun Aoqing. Moreover, this matter might deal a heavy blow to Jun Aoqing. Bastard, you're courting death. As soon as Tian Xie Xiaoqian finished speaking, Jun Chujian was instantly enraged. He could no longer suppress the anger in his heart and directly roared. In the next moment, his figure charged towards Tian Xie Xiaoqian like a berserk lion. Young master, watch out. The Ghost Valley's 7 disasters expressions changed as they cried out. Jun Chujian was simply insane. He actually attacked Tian Xie Xiaoqian. If Tian Xie Xiaoqian died, the person behind him would bring disaster to the entire Sacred Heaven Sword Union. Boom! However, Jun Chujian seemed to have lost his mind as he slashed out with his sword. The sword was like a surging wave that pressed towards Tian Xie Xiaoqian. No! Tian Xie Xiaoqian felt the boundless pressure and instantly cried out. His face was as pale as paper. He ignored Jun Chujian's threat and opened his mouth. He was betting that Jun Chujian wouldn't dare to attack him. Unfortunately, he lost the bet. Jun Chujian had really made a move on him. Tian Xie Xiaoqian wasn't weak, but the person he was facing was Jun Chujian. Jun Chujian's all-out attack was enough to instantly kill him. The Ghost Valley's 7 disasters attacked at almost the same time, but his sword aura wasn't at its strongest. Moreover, he was injured by Jun Chujian earlier. Therefore, he couldn't stop Jun Chujian at all. Boom! With a muffled sound, the Ghost Valley's 7 disasters figure was directly sent flying, drawing a bloody trail in the air. Boom! Then, a fatal sword flew towards Tian Xie Xiaoqian, with killing intent and death approaching. If this sword landed, Tian Xie Xiaoqian's fate would be certain. Tian Xie Xiaoqian's face was completely stiff as he faced death once again. He was so shocked that he couldn't say a word. However, at this moment, a sudden change occurred. Boom! High up in the sky, a sword will fell like a dark vortex, suddenly descending. Then a strange scene occurred. The sword intent hovered in the air and actually absorbed Jun Chujian's sword shadow. It was as if the sword shadow had sunk into the void and was devoured by the space. What's going on? The sudden scene made the crowd's eyes tremble violently. How terrifying! Anya, Minjia, and the other 2 gasped in horror. They could feel that the sword will that had suddenly appeared was extremely terrifying, completely surpassing their first encounter with the Monarch. Jun Chujian was already at the advanced stage of the divine sword body, a swordsman who was stronger than him. Wouldn't that mean that he was at the peak of the divine sword body, or even a profound meaning swordsman? Profound meaning swordsman was the strongest state of the 3 divine realms. Anya, Minjia, and the others had only heard of this state but they had never seen a swordsman of this state. They were already at the peak of the sword world, and they even thought that the profound meaning realm was illusory and did not exist. Now, it seemed that they were frogs at the bottom of a well. An even more terrifying swordsman was hiding in the abandoned land. Profound meaning. Nietion's eyes suddenly trembled, and he was extremely shocked. He could clearly feel that the sword intent that had suddenly appeared released an aura that was completely different from the other sword intents. It was a powerful aura that existed apart from the other sword intents. QL11, he was almost sure that the person who had attacked was definitely a profound meaning swordsman. This swordsman definitely had the strength to crush Jun Chujian. "It's you." Jun Chujian's pupils shrank when he saw his sword shadow being swallowed and absorbed. Then, he reacted and screamed in horror. His expression changed from anger to fear in an instant. He already knew the identity of the newcomer. It was the person who had left a sword mark on his divine sword body. Chapter 2295. Jun Chujian's sword power dissipated instantly. His entire body seemed to have lost all of his thoughts, and he became much older. That person had come personally. What happened next was out of his control. He knew very well how powerful that person was. In front of that person, any resistance would be futile. He was too powerful, so powerful that it made him feel hopeless. "Teacher." Heavenly Evil Xiaoqian's eyes lit up as he looked into the void and shouted in surprise, "Teacher." "Master." The 7 disasters of the Phantom Valley shouted excitedly at the same time as they steadied themselves. "Jun Chujian, I haven't seen you in a long time. You are still so stubborn." The next moment, a mighty voice resounded in the void. Immediately, a black-robed figure appeared. He was wearing a green ghost mask, and he was emitting an endless aura of sword essence as he stood in the sky. Although this figure did not exude an imposing aura, he seemed to be able to affect the space around him as the air around him stopped flowing. He was like a lonely king, looking down at everything with a pair of cold, emotionless eyes. Everyone who was under his gaze lowered their heads and did not dare to look at him directly. "Heavenly Evil Deity, it's really you." Jun Chujian looked up at the figure in the sky and said in a deep voice. Although he could not see the figure's face, he was sure that it was the Heavenly Evil Deity, the one who had left a sword scar in his body. "It's me," the Heavenly Evil Deity said flatly. His voice was calm, but it gave off an icy aura. "Ha!" Suddenly, Jun Chujian laughed bitterly and said, "Heavenly Evil Deity, I should have known that you would show up. You have always been so scheming. Princess Netherworld is so important to you, so you will definitely take her away. Even if you show up personally, I will not hesitate." His bitter laughter was full of helplessness and despair. "Jun Chujian, you know me well," the Heavenly Evil Deity said. The Heavenly Evil Deity opened his mouth again and said, "I will take Princess Netherworld away. No one can stop me." Princess of the Netherworld? The crowd was stunned, and their faces were filled with astonishment. They had no idea what the Heavenly Evil Deity and Jun Chujian were talking about. Nietion frowned and couldn't help but look at Jun Ouching. He knew that the Princess Netherworld that the Heavenly Evil Deity was talking about was Jun Ouching. It seemed that Jun Ouching was very important to the Heavenly Evil Deity. Otherwise, the Heavenly Evil Deity would not have shown himself. "Heavenly Evil Deity, are you going back on your word just to take Princess Netherworld away?" Jun Chujian's eyes flickered as he asked in a deep voice. "Break my promise?" The Heavenly Evil Deity was stunned for a moment. Then, he looked at the Heavenly Evil Xiaoqian and smiled faintly. He said, "Do you really believe a bet made by a child?" "You?" Jun Chujian's pupils shrank, and he couldn't say a word. What he wanted to mention was the bet between him and the Heavenly Evil Xiaoqian. Apparently, the Heavenly Evil Deity had been hiding for a long time. He just hadn't shown himself. He knew what the Heavenly Evil Xiaoqian had just done, but he said it was a bet made by a child. The Heavenly Evil Xiaoqian's words were like a fart to him. Hearing this, Nietion frowned and couldn't help but take a step forward. He sneered and said, "So the so-called experts are so shameless?" The heavenly evil deity was stunned for a moment. He fixed his eyes on Yetian, and a strange light flashed in his eyes. Then he smiled faintly and said, "So, you are the guy who activated the Holy Heaven Sword Seal. Your talent in swordsmanship is mediocre, but I'm amazed by your sword will. To think that you could actually condense such a strong sword intent with such a trashy talent like yours. It's really surprising." The heavenly evil deity's laughter was calm, but he didn't hide his contempt. Nyetian stared at the heavenly evil deity and didn't back down. He smiled faintly and said, "I'm surprised that a shameless person like you can become a divine mystery swordsman." The heavenly evil deity stopped smiling and his eyes darkened. He said coldly, "Kid, aren't you afraid that I'll kill you if you provoke me?" "Of course I am." Nyetian laughed loudly and said, "But what's the use of being afraid? You've noticed me a long time ago. I'm afraid that with your character, you'll kill me once and for all." He knew that the heavenly evil deity had noticed him, and the heavenly evil deity was just pretending to be surprised. He had almost killed the heavenly evil Xiaoqian, and that was enough reason for the heavenly evil deity to kill him. Jun Chujian looked at Nyetian and was stunned. Nyetian's fearless nature was truly worrisome. However, the heavenly evil deity's attitude toward Nyetian was strange. He didn't attack, as if he was afraid of something. "QL 11-inch kid, I don't want to offend the person behind you." The heavenly evil deity narrowed his eyes and said, "Don't get involved in this matter. I won't make things difficult for you." Nyetian heard the heavenly evil deity's words, and his face changed slightly. He was puzzled by the heavenly evil deity's attitude toward him just now. Could it be that the heavenly evil deity knew the mysterious man? However, Nyetian felt that the mysterious man might not be as powerful as the heavenly evil deity. The heavenly evil deity seemed to have no reason to be afraid of the mysterious man. After pondering for a moment, Nyetian's eyes flickered as he asked, "What if I insist on interfering?" The heavenly evil deity's eyes darkened, and he said coldly, "Kid, don't force me. My patience is limited." Nyetian was stunned for a while, and he saw the heavenly evil deity's reaction clearly. He could see that the heavenly evil deity was very afraid, and he was definitely not as relaxed as he looked. Nyetian even felt that the heavenly evil deity was not only afraid, but also panicked. "Nyetian, the person this guy is afraid of is not the mysterious person you saw. I'm afraid it's another person." At this moment, the little fat cat's voice suddenly rang out, and it said with a faint smile, "Another person?" Nyetian was stunned, and he didn't know how to react. "The Holy Heavens Patriarch," Fat Cat said with a faint smile. "The Holy Heavens Patriarch." Nyetian's eyes widened, and he almost exclaimed. Fat Cat meant that the person that the heavenly evil deity was afraid of was not the mysterious man, but the Holy Heavens Patriarch. Could it be that the heavenly evil deity saw through something? Nyetian frowned, and his expression changed drastically. "Let's give a try and find out," Fat Cat said with a smile. Nyetian smiled and stepped forward. He stared at the heavenly evil deity and said, "Heavenly evil deity, it seems that you already know about my relationship with the Holy Heavens Patriarch. Is that right?" When the heavenly evil deity heard Nyetian mention the Holy Heavens Patriarch, his eyes narrowed, and he couldn't hide his fear. "I guessed right. The relationship between this kid and the Holy Heavens Patriarch is not ordinary," the heavenly evil deity said in his heart, and his eyes trembled. Chapter 2296. The heavenly evil monarch looked at Nyetian with a complicated gaze. He had only guessed something, but he had no idea what the relationship between Nyetian and the divine heaven ancestor was. Looking at the heavenly evil monarch's reaction, Nyetian's lips rose as he provoked, "You're afraid." Even if the heavenly evil monarch was trying to conceal it, Nyetian still managed to see through it. At the same time, the faces of Jun Chujian and the rest changed. The heavenly evil monarch's reaction was truly abnormal. "I have some friendship with the divine heaven ancestor." A brief moment later, The heavenly evil monarch's gaze turned firm as he continued. That move you used earlier should be from the three-talent sacred array. But I'm puzzled. Why did your sword move contain the intent of the three-talent sacred array? But the aura was completely different from the three-talent sacred array. His calm voice fell in everyone's ears, but it was like a clap of thunder. The heavenly evil monarch actually knew the divine heaven ancestor. The eyes of Jun, Chu Jian, and the rest trembled as they were instantly dumbfounded. No one knew what era the sacred heaven ancestor was. But the heavenly evil monarch actually knew the divine heaven ancestor. Then, who exactly was he? How shocking was his age? Everyone's reaction was even more exaggerated. They were petrified as they looked at the heavenly evil monarch with astonishment. The divine heaven ancestor could be said to be the legend of the sword Tao in the abandoned land. At this moment, they actually witnessed a swordsman of the same generation as the divine heaven ancestor. Thus, the shock in their hearts could be imagined. Looking at the heavenly evil monarch, Nietian was also shocked. He never expected that the heavenly evil monarch would know the divine heaven ancestor. However, he still maintained his composure and suppressed the shock in his heart with a smile. I never expected that you would know about the three-talent sacred array. The things that the heavenly evil monarch knew far exceeded Nietian's imagination. With just a single move, he managed to see through the three-talent sacred array. His eyesight was truly unique. I know what the divine heaven sword seal is. The heavenly evil monarch's gaze calmed down as he replied, Back then, when the divine heaven ancestor left behind the divine heaven sword seal, I was present. You were able to activate the sacred heaven sword seal without being killed by the sacred heaven sword soul. This is enough to prove that your relationship with the sacred heaven ancestor is not ordinary. What's even rarer is that the sacred heaven ancestor was willing to use the Trinity sacred formation on you. This means that your identity is extremely terrifying. I don't know who you are, so I don't want to offend you. Furthermore, you're just an outsider to the sacred heaven sword alliance. There's no need for you to get involved. The heavenly evil monarch's words were sincere. Smart people could tell that he was expressing goodwill to Nietian. Nietian smiled faintly and did not say anything. He was shocked in his heart. It seems that the heavenly evil monarch has a deep understanding of the sacred sky ancestor, and he's also fearful of the latter. Furthermore, judging from the heavenly evil monarch's words, the divine heaven ancestor wasn't dead. Nietian, seeing that Nietan did not speak, the heavenly evil monarch spoke once more as a token appeared in his hand. This token in my hand is the heavenly evil order of the heavenly evil family. As long as you don't interfere in this matter, this token is yours. With the heavenly evil order, you can get the heavenly evil family to do 3 things for you. This deal will only benefit you and not harm you at all. Deal? The heavenly evil monarch raised the token in his hand. As long as Nietian agreed to it, he would hand the token over. Teacher, Master, when Tian Xie Shaoqian and the 7 calamities saw the heavenly evil monarch's actions, they were briefly stunned before they exclaimed. They never expected that the heavenly evil monarch would take out the heavenly evil order to prevent Niet Tian from interfering. The heavenly evil order was the supreme token of the heavenly evil family, and only a few core members of the heavenly evil family could possess it. At this moment, even if they weren't willing to admit it, they could tell that the heavenly evil monarch was fearful of Nietian. After all, there was a terrifying figure behind Nietian. The eyes of Jun, Chu Jian, and the rest violently trembled as they focused on Nietian. No one expected that the powerful heavenly evil monarch would take the initiative to express goodwill before Nietian. Nietian's reply would decide Jun Aoqing's fate and even the fate of the entire Sacred Heaven Sword Alliance. Lord Heavenly Evil Monarch, I'm not an unreasonable person. At this moment, Niet Tian finally spoke with a faint smile. I know that the Heavenly Evil Order is a good thing, but I'm not interested in it. I just want to remind Lord Heavenly Evil Monarch that as an expert, you must abide by your words and promises. When the Heavenly Evil Monarch heard Niet Tian's words, he knitted his brows and his gaze sank. Evidently, Nie Tian was reminding him of the bet with Tian Xie Shaoqian. Nie Tian's attitude showed that he would definitely protect Jun Aoqing. You're really going to interfere in this matter? The heavenly evil monarch asked with a solemn gaze. Yeah. Nie Tian nodded his head and firmly replied. Teacher, let me kill that brat. At this moment, Tian Xie Shaoqian suddenly roared as he looked at Nie Tian with killing intent. As long as the heavenly evil monarch nodded his head, he would immediately make a move to kill Nie Tian. Shut up. The heavenly evil monarch coldly rebuked as he swept his gaze at Tian Xie Shaoqian, which caused the latter's eyes to tremble with his face turning pale. If it wasn't for Tian Xie Shaoqian being too arrogant and making a bet, they wouldn't have to go through so much trouble. You're Nie Tian, right? After that, the heavenly evil monarch calmed down and looked at Jun Aoqing. Since you want to interfere in this matter, then I will give you face as well as the divine heaven ancestor. I will now tell you a story. If the Netherworld Princess still wants to stay in the Cloud Valley sacred sky after listening to my story, then I will not force her. But if she wants to leave, then you can't force her to stay. Do you accept this suggestion? Nie Tian squinted his eyes before he nodded his head. Sure. After you're done with your story, Jun Aoqing can decide if she wants to stay or leave. Good. The heavenly evil monarch laughed as he swept his gaze at Jun Aoqing. He seemed to be extremely confident. At this moment, Jun Chujian's face was extremely unsightly. He knew what the heavenly evil monarch wanted to say, but there was nothing he could do to stop him. Aoqing, I hope that you won't blame me. Jun Chujian sighed in his heart as he secretly glanced at Jun Aoqing. QL11, W, what are you guys talking about? Jun Aoqing's little face was filled with fear, her eyes trembling, and the tears in her eyes had already flowed down her cheeks. Netherworld Princess, it looks like you have no idea about your origins. The heavenly evil monarch smiled as he waved his hand. A massive barrier appeared and enveloped Nie Tian, Jun Aoqing, and the rest. Evidently, the heavenly evil monarch did not want anyone to hear his words. Some things were secrets that couldn't be leaked. After the heavenly evil monarch set up the barrier, he swept his gaze at Jun Chujian and smiled at Jun Aoqing. Netherworld Princess, I will tell you now. You're not Jun Aoqing, and Jun Chujian isn't your grandfather. Your real name is Netherworld Flawless. Chapter 2297. The heavenly evil monarch's voice resounded, and every single word of his resounded in Jun Aoqing's ears like a clap of thunder. She has lived for 18 years, and she has always been Jun Aoqing's identity. But now, someone suddenly told her that she wasn't Jun Aoqing, but someone else. Her identity was also fake, and her real identity was someone else. How could she accept such a sudden change? Nonsense. I don't believe it. This isn't real. It's not real. Jun Aoqing seemed to have gone insane as she covered her ears. She didn't want to hear anything else. Jun Aoqing, calm down. Nie Tian stood beside Jun Aoqing, reached out to grab her hand, and said in a deep voice. Jun Aoqing was just an 18-year-old girl without any experience, so she naturally wouldn't know what to do when facing this sudden change. However, Nie Tian knew that there were times when some things couldn't be avoided and had to be faced. Jun Aoqing's eyes trembled as she looked at Nie Tian with tears covering her face. The heavenly evil monarch did not press on, but stood on the spot to give Jun Aoqing time to accept. After a while, Jun Aoqing calmed down a little, and her whole person was much calmer. Netherworld Princess, you can ask Jun Chujian if what I said is true. The heavenly evil monarch smiled. Grandfather, is what he said true? Jun Aoqing's gaze blazed as she looked at Jun Chujian. Jun Chujian wore a pained expression with hesitation in his eyes. However, he did not speak and nodded his head. He had been hiding Jun Aoqing's identity all this while. But in his heart, he knew that one day, Jun Aoqing would know everything. Why? Why are you hiding it from me? Jun Aoqing was absent-minded with a pained expression. Because he's afraid. The heavenly evil monarch's voice resounded once more. Because Jun Chujian is your enemy, your greatest enemy. Enemy? Jun Aoqing's eyes froze as she looked at the heavenly evil monarch and exclaimed, What are you talking about? With a cold gaze, the heavenly evil monarch responded, Netherworld princess, you're the last member of the Netherworld family. 18 years ago, your Netherworld family was exterminated by someone. And the person who exterminated the Netherworld family is Jun Chu Jian, right in front of you. The heavenly evil monarch practically enunciated each and every word out of his mouth. The way he looked at Jun Chu Jian was cold and harsh. Impossible. This was impossible. You must be lying to me. You must be lying to me. The icy voice was like a bolt from the blue, resounding in Jun Ouching's heart, causing her to lose her mind and scream like she had lost her mind. QL11 hearing the heavenly evil monarch's words. Tian was also shocked. He had already guessed that Jun Ouching wasn't Jun Chujian's biological granddaughter, but she had another identity. However, he never expected that Jun Chujian would be the enemy of Jun Ouching's clan. The heavenly evil monarch was clearly not lying. At this moment, Tian finally understood why Jun Chujian would rather kill the heavenly evil monarch than allow the latter to speak. This secret was indeed too big. Netherworld princess, you can ask Jun Chujian yourself if you don't believe me. The heavenly evil monarch said with a cold smile. Ouching, calm down. Calm down. Seeing that Jun Ouching was about to go crazy, Jun Chujian said with a pained expression, You really kill my clansmen? Hearing Jun Chujian's voice, Jun Ouching suddenly opened her mouth. Her eyes became cold as she asked sternly, Ouching, it's not what you think. Back then Jun Chujian's face froze. He wanted to explain, but he was interrupted by Jun Ouching. I'm asking you, did you kill my clansmen? Isn't that right? Jun Ouching roared. Her delicate face became ferocious. Jun Chujian's lips trembled with pain, but he couldn't speak a word. Jun Chujian, you dare to do it, but you don't dare to admit it? The heavenly evil monarch sneered as he roared. Jun Chujian's eyes trembled as he was briefly stunned before he nodded his head. He admitted it. You really killed my clansmen. Jun Ouching's expression froze as her eyes lost focus. It was as if she had lost all her faith. How could she accept that the person that brought her up, the person that she viewed as her kin, was actually the enemy that annihilated her clan? At the same time, Jun Chujian's expression was also filled with pain. The matter back then was complicated, and it wasn't something that could be explained with just a few words. But at this moment, he couldn't explain too much. Ouching, I was the one that killed your clansmen. If you want to take revenge, then make your move. Jun Chujian suddenly took a step forth. He knew that there were some things that couldn't be avoided. If she could die in Jun Ouching's hands, she would be willing to do so. Jun Ouching was stunned as she looked at Jun Chujian. Her hands trembled, but she couldn't raise them. How could she make a move against someone that had raised her for 18 years? Jun Ouching, pull yourself together. At this moment, Tian looked at Jun Ouching and solemnly said, Don't be impulsive and do something wrong. He could tell that there was a reason why Jun Chujian annihilated the Netherworld family. At this moment, Jun Chujian must be filled with regret in his heart. Otherwise, he wouldn't have risked his life to protect Jun Ouching. Heavenly evil monarch, this is your story? Shortly after, Tian looked at the heavenly evil monarch and declared, I'm done with my story. You can leave now. The heavenly evil monarch was briefly stunned before he looked at Jun Ouching. Netherworld princess, you already know about your identity. Are you still going to stay here? Jun Chujian is the enemy that annihilated your clan. Are you going to stay by his side? Let's go. Our heavenly diabolism and Netherworld aristocratic families share the same origin. Since the Netherworld family has been annihilated, you can join the heavenly evil family. I guarantee that your position in the heavenly evil family will be the same as your real identity. As long as you're willing, you will be the princess of the heavenly evil empire from now on. Are you willing? After that, the heavenly evil monarch looked at Jun Ouching with confidence. Since Jun Ouching already knew that Jun Chujian was the enemy that annihilated her clan, how could she stay here? In his view, the best choice for Jun Ouching was to follow him and join the heavenly evil family. At this moment, June Ouching had calmed down and her eyes flickered as she looked at the heavenly evil monarch. However, she did not speak for a long time. Ouching, he's lying to you. Seeing that June Ouching seemed to be moved, Jun Chujian immediately said, he has other plans for you to join the heavenly evil family. You can't go with him. If I don't go with me, then are you going to stay by my enemy's side? The heavenly evil monarch snickered with a cold gaze. Jun Chujian was taken aback and couldn't say a word at once. He could tell from June Ouching's gaze that it's impossible for the latter to stay in the Cloud Valley sacred sky. I will not stay here. At this moment, June Ouching spoke as she swept her gaze over Jun Chujian. Follow me. When the heavenly evil monarch heard June Ouching's words, his eyes blazed as he yelled out in joy. I'm sorry, but I won't go with you. June Ouching coldly rejected. Chapter 2298. June Ouching's words left the heavenly evil monarch and the rest dumbfounded. You want to leave with Nye Tian? Practically at the same time, the heavenly evil monarch and Jun Chujian reacted and exclaimed. They never imagined that June Ouching would choose not to stay or leave with the heavenly evil monarch. She chose to leave with Nye Tian. Nye Tian was also stunned and couldn't react for a long time. June Ouching's choice was too sudden, and it exceeded everyone's expectations. Ao Qing, have you really thought it through? Jun Chujian reacted. His expression recovered a lot, and asked a little nervously. June Ouching's decision surprised him, but at the same time, it made him happy. As long as June Ouching didn't leave with the heavenly evil monarch, he could accept it. Furthermore, he could tell that Nye Tian wasn't an ordinary person. With June Ouching by Nye Tian's side, he felt assured. Netherworld Princess Yu, the heavenly evil monarch had a completely different attitude towards June Ouching's decision, and he nearly vomited blood from the anger. Nye Tian, let's go. June Ouching coldly said without paying any attention to anyone else. All right. Nye Tian smiled before he looked at Jun Chujian. Alliance ruler, I'll take my leave first. Don't worry, June Ouching will be fine with me by my side. Please. Jun Chujian nodded his head with gratitude. Nodding his head, Nye Tian looked at the heavenly evil monarch. Lord Heavenly Evil Monarch, this is June Ouching's decision, and I believe that you won't object to it, right? The heavenly evil monarch's gaze sank, and even the green mask on his face trembled. He had previously made an agreement with Nye Tian to let June Ouching make the decision after the story. Now that June Ouching had made a decision, how could he go back on his word? With his status, it would be too shameless of him to go back on his word. You guys can leave. The heavenly evil monarch said with suppressed rage in his voice, showing his reluctance. Goodbye. Nye Tian smiled faintly and said to June Ouching, let's go. The two silhouettes flickered and disappeared in an instant. Looking at the direction that Nye Tian and June Ouching left in, the heavenly evil monarch felt unwilling in his heart, but there's nothing he could do. Jun Chujian, on the other hand, had a complicated expression on his face. He thought to himself, Nye Tian, we will meet again soon. The crowd stared blankly at Nye Tian and June Ouching leaving, not knowing what had happened. Tian Xie Shaoqian and the Ghost Valley's 7 disasters looked at him coldly, but there was nothing they could do. On the other side, the expressions of the 3 legends were quite interesting. He left. Guangwu Fengyan was the first to speak with a frown. Of course, he wanted to make Nye Tian stay, but he couldn't. Moreover, Jun Chujian and the others were still present. If he were to make a move, it would not be as simple as breaking the rules. He might even be killed by Jun Chujian. This kid is too terrifying. Anya Minjia nodded and said, it seems that if we want to catch him, we have to do it in person. Guangwu Fengyan was stunned for a moment and asked in astonishment, you mean that Lord will personally appear? Yes. Anya Minjia's eyes darkened as he said, although I don't know what secrets Nye Tian has, I do know. He is very important to that Lord. That Lord will not let him leave the Forsaken Land. Nodding his head, Guangwu Fengyan glanced at the heavenly evil monarch and bitterly smiled. Brother Dark Knight, it looks like the land of abandonment is too small in our eyes. Perhaps we have never been at the peak. Those who are hiding behind the scenes will treat us as a joke. Anya Minjia bitterly smiled with an unsightly expression. They were self-proclaimed to be experts at the pinnacle of the sword Tao, but the person they saw today made them understand that they weren't at the pinnacle. Not to mention the heavenly evil monarch, even the Ghost Valley's 7 calamities were stronger than them. I wonder who is stronger, the heavenly evil monarch or that lord? Anya Minjia's gaze suddenly trembled as he muttered. Guangwu Fingyan chuckled and shook his head, declining to comment further. Although they were working for that lord, they have never seen the latter. Hence, they had no idea about that lord's strength. With Nie Tian and Jun Aoqing's departure, this show had come to an end. As the crowd slowly dispersed, the heavenly evil monarch and the 3 legend rank experts also left. The Cloud Valley sacred sky returned to its calm state. QL11 at the same time, outside the Cloud Valley sacred sky, 2 silhouettes were swiftly shuttling through the sky. They were Nie Tian and Jun Aoqing, who had just left the Cloud Valley sacred sky. Jun Aoqing was in a rush to leave, so she swiftly shuttled through the spatial vortex formed by her sword intent. Half an hour later, the 2 of them were already 1,000 miles away from the Cloud Valley sacred sky. Jun Aoqing, you must be tired. Let's stop for now. Nie Tian could sense that Jun Aoqing's aura was somewhat unstable, so he anxiously said. Jun Aoqing abruptly turned around and looked at Nie Tian. Her pretty face was as white as paper, and beads of sweat oozed from her forehead. She looked very embarrassed. Jun Aoqing, what's wrong? Nie Tian's eyes squinted as he urgently asked. He could sense that Jun Aoqing's aura was unstable, but he wasn't too bothered about it. He only thought that the latter was exhausted. But, judging from the current situation, the situation wasn't normal. Nie Tian, Jun Aoqing opened her mouth, but the moment she opened her mouth, her body trembled and she almost fell to the ground. Nie Tian hurriedly stepped forward and held Jun Aoqing in his arms, but his expression changed all of a sudden. He suddenly felt that Jun Aoqing's body was burning hot, as if she was about to be burned. What's wrong? Nie Tian screamed. He didn't know what had happened. Jun Aoqing wanted to say something, but she had no strength at all, so she directly passed out. Nie Tian was shocked. He used his divine sense to check Jun Aoqing's body, and suddenly found that there was an extremely violent force inside her body. This force was extremely terrifying. It was like a flame that was going to burn Jun Aoqing. At the same time, Fat Cat's panicked voice sounded. She paused for a second, then said, Bloodline, sword seal. Nie Tian went blank for a moment before a surprised expression appeared on his face. Bloodline, sword seals. He obviously didn't expect that there was a bloodline sword seal inside Jun Aoqing's body. The so-called bloodline sword seal was actually a kind of bloodline power. However, this kind of bloodline power was different from ordinary bloodline power. It existed in the form of sword seal. It was said that those who had bloodline sword seals were born swordsmen. The bloodline sword seal was a kind of inherited power. It depended on the swordsman's talent as to how much bloodline power one could inherit. Normally, the bloodline sword seal was awakened very early. Most of the time, it was awakened when the swordsman was condensing his sword intent. Jun Aoqing was already a swordsman. Why did she awaken the bloodline sword seal only now? Boom! While Nie Tian was still confused, Jun Aoqing was suddenly surrounded by a strong sword intent, which was like a burning flame and instantly covered her whole body. The next moment, wherever the sword intent went, Jun Aoqing's clothes were all torn into pieces. A perfect girl's body appeared in front of Nie Tian. Chapter 2299. Sword seal out of control. Nie Tian was shocked. He didn't even have time to look at Jun Aoqing's appearance. He could feel a strange power slowly growing stronger in Jun Aoqing's body, as if it was growing. QL11, but the growth of this power caused great damage to Jun Aoqing, turning into a scorching sword intent, burning her body. Boom! Immediately after, Jun Aoqing's body suddenly released a strong blood qi, filling the air with a thick smell of blood. Not good. Nie Tian could feel the blood qi in Jun Aoqing's body becoming more and more violent, He couldn't suppress it at all. "Fat, what's going on?" In the next moment, he cried out in panic. Things happened too suddenly. He didn't know what to do. She must have been too emotional just now. The blood chi in her body is surging, unintentionally activating the bloodline sword seal, causing it to go out of control. Fat Cat answered nervously. Her eyes flickered, trying to think of a solution. "What do we do now?" Nietian roared. He could feel the blood chi in June Ouching's body becoming more violent, constantly leaking out. If this continued, it wouldn't be long before June Ouching's blood chi dried up and died. The bloodline sword seal in her body is too strong. She needs a large amount of blood chi to completely awaken it. Fat Cat was also panicking. She said anxiously, "She's not strong enough. If this continues, she won't be able to hold on." Nietian didn't have time to ask too many questions. He directly released the power of the Terra Source, continuously transferring life force to June Ouching. But this could only temporarily delay the loss of June Ouching's blood chi. It couldn't last for too long. Even if Nietian had the Terra Source, his life force was limited. Once it was exhausted, June Ouching would fall into a dangerous situation. "Nietian, we need to return to the Dark Night City. Only the Dragon Spring Vein can save her." Fat Cat suddenly thought of something and shouted anxiously. "Dragon Spring Vein?" Nietian was taken aback for a moment, but quickly reacted. Right now, June Ouching's blood chi was burning fiercely. The Dragon Spring Vein contained boundless life energy, which would definitely support her to completely awaken the sword seal within her body. What about June Ouching? Can she hold on? In the next moment, Nietian's gaze focused, and he asked nervously. They were still quite a distance away from Dark Night City. Even if Nietian ran without stopping, it would take him at least a day. However, with June Ouching's current condition, she couldn't hold on for even a day. "Put her into the 9 extremities. I will help her suppress the bloodline sword seal for the time being." The Fat Cat nodded and appeared beside Nietian. "All right," Nietian agreed and took out the 9 extremities. Fat Cat led June Ouching straight into the 9 superbs. "Out!" Nietian roared in a low voice, his eyes filled with determination. A pair of astral soul wings appeared on his back, and when they spread out, they actually spanned 1,000 meters. With a violent flap, 2 violent shockwaves were generated in the air. His silhouette was like an arrow released from a bow, piercing through the air. At the same time, within the 9 extremities, Fat Cat placed June Ouching on a piece of empty ground, and with a flicker, he disappeared in an instant. When he reappeared, he brought along tens of 9 hearts demonic lotuses. He released the colored glass chi and directly extracted the 9 hearts demonic lotus's core, then extracted it into life energy and injected it into June Ouching's body, temporarily suppressing the bloodline sword seal. The efficiency of Fat Cat's method of extracting the 9 hearts demonic lotus's energy was actually very low. 99% of the 9 hearts demonic lotus energy was wasted, and only 1% was truly extracted. However, he had no other choice. As long as he could save June Ouching's life, it was worth it to waste some 9 hearts demonic lotus. This lass's aura is still slowly weakening. I hope Nietian can quickly return to the Dark Night City. Fat Cat sensed June Ouching's aura as he murmured. He was very surprised. What exactly was the bloodline sword seal in June Ouching's body? Why was it so powerful? The majority of bloodline sword seals would awaken when the swordsman condensed his sword intent. Only an extremely small portion would awaken when the swordsman's sword intent rose. Ordinary people would think that if the bloodline sword seal was awakened late, it would definitely not be a powerful bloodline sword seal. This kind of thinking was exactly the opposite. Fat Cat knew that the later the bloodline sword seal awakened, the stronger the bloodline sword seal was. The awakening of the bloodline sword seal required external stimulation. The majority of bloodline sword seals awakened when the swordsman condensed his sword intent. If the sword intent was not strong enough, it would not be able to stimulate the bloodline sword seal to awaken. Fat Cat had some understanding of the bloodline sword seal, but he had never seen any bloodline sword seal that the swordsman had yet to awaken after stepping into the godly state. One should know that June Ouching had already reached the beginner realm of sword and martial arts as one. Her sword intent was already very strong, but it was still not enough to stimulate the bloodline sword seal to awaken. June Ouching's bloodline sword seal would not normally be awakened. This was because she was greatly stimulated, causing the blood in her body to churn, causing her sword intent to become unstable, and inadvertently stimulating the bloodline sword seal to awaken. How powerful is the bloodline sword seal in this lass's body? Fat Cat's eyes trembled slightly, and there was a trace of excitement in his eyes. From the blazing sword intent around June Ouching, he could feel that the latter's bloodline sword seal was extremely terrifying. If this lass can successfully awaken the bloodline sword seal, she will definitely be a monster in the sword Dao in the future. Fat Cat said in a deep voice, and his face was very worried. He also did not know how long the power of the Nine Hearts demonic lotus could allow June Ouching to endure. Whether or not June Ouching could survive this, it all depended on Nietian. Nietian's figure was like lightning, and he flew across the sky like a shocking rainbow. He was worried about June Ouching's safety and did not dare to slack off in the slightest. Half a day later, he had already run thousands of miles. In this half a day, he did not stop for a moment. Even with the support of the huge power of the stars in his body and the continuous recovery of the earth vein source, he was already so tired at this moment that he was panting. Panting heavily, Nietian muttered to himself, "Less than 500 kilometers away. I'll be there in a minute." June Ouching's safety depended on him. How could he stop? Fortunately, he was almost at the Dark Night City. As long as he arrived at the Dark Night City, everything would be solved. About another half an hour later, Nietian's figure arrived at the Dark Night Mountains, and he could already faintly see the shadow of the Dark Night City. "June Ouching, you must hold on. We'll be there soon." Nietian took a deep breath, and his figure flew and did not stop to rest. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. However, at this moment, he suddenly heard a series of whistling sounds coming from the sky. Arrow rain. In the next moment, his eyes narrowed, and his expression changed. He looked up at the sky. In the distant sky, countless sharp arrows pierced through the air, densely packed, like rolling dark clouds, and pressed down on Nietian. Not good. Nietian felt the strong momentum of the arrow rain, and couldn't help but scream, and his expression changed. The wings behind his back shook violently, and his figure immediately retreated, wanting to avoid the arrow rain. Chapter 2300. Swoosh! The rain of arrows that covered the sky poured down like a waterfall. Nietian instantly felt that his entire body was enveloped by an extremely powerful aura. It actually exerted a great amount of pressure on him, making it hard for him to breathe. The aura of this rain of arrows is so strong. In an instant, his gaze froze, and he exclaimed at his heart. The sky full of sharp arrows connected into one, and the aura was extremely powerful. It was like a huge array, extremely terrifying. I can't avoid it. Let's go all out. In the next moment, Nietian reacted. He roared in his heart and directly activated the 3 major forbidden skills. The aura around him skyrocketed to the extreme. Human sword star cutting. He stabbed out with his sword. The mighty sword shadow was like a galloping dragon, rolling out and rushing straight towards the sky full of arrows. Rumble. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Immediately, the sky full of arrows rained down and collided with the sword shadow. A loud roar sounded, followed by an ear-piercing sound. Nietian's figure moved, and with the momentum of the sword shadow, he forcefully rushed forward. He clearly saw that the huge sword shadow was gradually torn apart and shattered under the impact of countless sharp arrows. However, he relied on the space that the sword shadow squeezed out to forcefully carve out a path of survival. The moment the sword shadow completely shattered, Nietian activated the extreme Yang Sky armor. His figure was like a dragon, breaking through the abyss and rushing into the sky, and he rushed out of the encirclement of the rain of arrows. However, the moment he rushed out of the rain of arrows, before his figure stabilized, he felt an even more terrifying aura fluctuation. He suddenly raised his head and saw that in the high sky in front of him, there were countless martial artists in black standing. The aura of all the martial artists in black joined together, like a stormy sea, surging violently. Passing night Imperial Guards. When Yetian saw these people in black, he immediately knew their identity. His eyes couldn't help but tremble, and he exclaimed in surprise. He was very familiar with the aura of these martial artists in black. They were the passing night Imperial Guards that he had met outside the Thousand Demons Cave. At this moment, the passing night Imperial Guards in front of him were a black mass. If there weren't 10,000 people, there were at least 8,000. It was obvious that this formation was even more terrifying than before. Nyetian. At this moment, a low, murderous voice rang out, after which a silhouette stepped through the air and appeared in front of Nyetian. Yi Chenli. Nyetian saw that figure's face clearly and called out the other party's name. The person who appeared at this moment was none other than Nyetian's defeated opponent, Dead Knight Crown Prince Yi Chenli. Nyetian, long time no see. Yi Chenli's gaze was incomparably gloomy, and his hatred was intense. His voice was even more sinister and sinister as he said in a deep voice, "To be able to break through the Arrow Rain Grand Formation, looks like your strength has increased quite a bit. Unfortunately, your strength is still stagnant." Nyetian smiled faintly, his face full of mockery. Actually, he and Yi Chenli had only not seen each other for 2 months. His abilities had indeed improved a lot, but Yi Chenli's had not improved at all. To a deity realm martial artist, 2 months was just a snap of the fingers. Moreover, Yi Chenli had damaged his martial foundation not too long ago. His martial foundation had probably not recovered yet. So how could he talk about increasing his strength? Nyetian. Yi Chenli roared after being mocked by Nyetian. Then he smiled coldly and said, "Do you really think that I, the Crown Prince, would have to kill you myself? I'll tell you the truth. I've been waiting for you here for a long time. If you want to return to Dark Knight City, you have to pass through this place. Right now, you're facing off against 8,000 late Paramount God Death Knight Star Guards. I'd like to see how you're going to get out of here alive." The muscles on Yi Chenli's face were trembling, and his expression was incomparably sinister. His hatred for Nyetian ran so deep that he wanted nothing more than to skin him alive, eat his flesh, and swallow his bones. "Let's go all out," Nyetian said, his eyes narrowing as he swept his gaze over the Star Guards. Then he turned into a beam of light that shot toward Yi Chenli. Jun Aoqing was in grave danger, and he had no time to waste. Even if he had to face 8,000 late Paramount gods, he had to go all out. Yi Chenli's pupils constricted. He had never imagined that Nyetian would come charging at him. However, his reaction was extremely fast. His figure suddenly retreated, and countless passing night Imperial Guards immediately rushed up behind him. Damn it! Floating in midair, Nyetian was wreathed in magical symbols. His aura soared to its peak, and his sword intent surged. Sword light blossomed, and a violent aura spread out. Sword severing 8 wilds. He growled, slashing out with his sword. His sword will surged, transforming into a towering sword image that shot toward the dead Knight Star Guards. Roar! The passing night Forbidden Guards gathered together. At the same time, they released their auras, connecting together like a heavy mountain. It was extremely terrifying. Rumble! When the sword image landed, it was blocked by the Dead Knight Star Guard's energy and shattered. Nyetian's sword will was strong, but there was no way he could single-handedly take on so many Dead Knight Star Guards. QL-11 he had originally planned to capture Yi Chenli and use him as a hostage to threaten the Dead Knight Star Guards into retreating. But Yi Chenli was on high alert and didn't give him the chance to do so. "Kill him! Kill him!" Yi Chenli roared when he saw that Nyetian's attack had failed. His eyes shone with venomous light, and he seemed to have gone mad. "Kill!" The next moment, the excruciating night Imperial guards uttered a furious roar. Their voices echoed across the heavens and earth like raging thunder. Boom! Instantly, a boundlessly violent aura descended and pressed down on Yetion. The combined energy of so many dead Night Star Guards was definitely more terrifying than most peak Paramount gods. Yetion felt the pressure, and his eyes narrowed. Flowing Death Seal open. Next, he reached out with a hand and roared. All of a sudden, his energy gathered, and a terrifying palm appeared to meet the pressure of the dead Night Star Guards. Rumble. Intense rumbling sounds could be heard, and space trembled. Terrifying energy surged out, as if heaven and earth were about to shatter. Yetion retreated, blood oozing out of the corner of his mouth. He steadied himself, looked at the dead Night Star Guards, and murmured, "The energy of these dead Night Star Guards is truly terrifying." At this moment, the dead Night Guards were staring at Yetion in astonishment. They had never imagined that Yetion would be so strong. He had faced thousands of late-stage Paramount gods head-on, and not only was he not dead, he wasn't even seriously injured. When Yi Chunli saw this, his eyes trembled, and his expression turned sluggish. It had only been 2 months, yet Yetion's cultivation base had risen to such a terrifying level. This was simply too terrifying. "I have to kill him. I have to kill him." Yi Chunli roared in his heart, his eyes trembling. There was a voice in his heart telling him that this was his last chance to kill Yetion. If he couldn't kill Yetion this time, he would never have another chance. The speed at which his strength increased was even more freakish than normal. Yi Chunli even felt that the talent of the 9 sons of heaven from the land of the Forsaken was trash compared to Yetion. Chapter 23:01. Yes. The 8,000 passing night guards responded in unison, their voices shaking the heavens and earth. Yetion frowned, and his heart sank. "Seems like I have to risk my life to break through the encirclement. Kill! Kill! Kill!" At that very moment, countless dead Night Guards let out wild roars as they launched one frenzied attack after another towards Yetion from all directions. These passing Night Guards were obviously well-trained, and they cooperated well with each other. They formed groups of more than 10 people and attacked together to kill Yetion. 12 Heaven Slaying Sword Formation open. Seeing this, Yetion didn't hesitate. Sword intent surged from his body, and 12 gigantic sword shadows soared into the sky like giant dragons. Kill! In the next moment, he roared, and his eyes locked onto the passing Night Guards. His figure moved, and the starlight sky slash was unleashed, charging straight over. Rumble. Bang. 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 In the void, explosions sounded, and terrifying muffled sounds lingered in the ears. Yetion's figure was like a violent sword, sharp and terrifying. Wherever his sword shadow passed, there were ghostly wails and wolf howls. More than 10 figures in black were sent flying by the impact, leaving bloody trails in the air. QL11 at the same time, Yetion was also hit by several attacks. The Star Soul armor on his body shook, as though it was going to shatter at the next moment. This fellow is really a madman. How terrifying. Countless passing Night Guards saw this scene, and their eyes were filled with horror. They didn't expect that Yetion was actually so strong. He took the attacks head-on and killed more than 10 passing Night Guards. Damn it! Yi Chunli saw this scene from afar, and he roared, "A bunch of trash. What are you all waiting for? All of you attack. Kill him. Kill Yetion." The current Yi Chunli was in a crazed state, like a madman. He only had eyes for Yetion. He must kill the latter. Kill. 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 In the blink of an eye, countless battle cries rang out. The passing Night Imperial Guards attacked repeatedly, attacking towards Yetion. Yetion's figure was like a mountain, standing tall in the sky, his body surging with violent sword intent. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, and the Star Soul armor on his body had already cracked open several glaring cracks. He had been running for half a day and was exhausted. Moreover, it was too much for him to deal with so many Death Night Guards at the same time. Even if his martial body was terrifying and his recovery ability was astonishing. He still couldn't withstand this kind of consumption. Nietion. It was at this point that the fat cat suddenly appeared. She disappeared from the 9 superlatives and entered the nascent embryo dimension. The little girl is in a bad situation, she said anxiously. I can't suppress the bloodline sword seal for much longer. Get out of here. Nietion's face sank, and his gaze was cold and murderous. It wasn't that he didn't want to leave, but he was up against 8,000 late paramount gods. Screw it. Time to go all out. A moment later, his eyes focused, and his paragon dragon meridians rotated madly. Boundless dragon energy surged out, and a boundless sea of lightning appeared behind him. Roar. The crimson dragon appeared, its roar shaking heaven and earth. What a terrifying aura. When the passing Night Imperial Guards saw this scene, they cried out in unison, their expressions astounded. However, they had the advantage in numbers, and their combined attacks were shocking. Boom, boom, boom. Almost in the blink of an eye, countless terrifying attacks rained down on Nietion. Since you people want to kill me, I'll gladly oblige. Nietion roared, stepping onto the crimson dragon, his eyes bloodshot, making him look like a demonic god. He drew on the primal chaos flame to envelop the dragon. In the next moment, the giant dragon tumbled out, its huge body stirring up a boundless force. Dragon Chi raged and raged, causing the space to tremble. Bam, bam, bam. Countless attacks landed on the dragon's body, leaving wounds of various sizes, and the dragon energy began to dissipate. However, Nietion didn't care about them at all. He continued to charge toward the dead Knight Imperial Guards. Roar. The dragon roared. Arg. Countless screams sounded in the sky, and countless figures in black exploded under the pressure of the powerful dragon's power, turning into blood light and disappearing. The air was filled with the stench of blood, and even the air was dyed dark red. Bam, bam, bam. Along with a series of muffled sounds, everywhere Nietion went, the scene was a bloody one. Yichunli watched from afar and sucked in a breath of cold air. Even his expression froze. Nietion's strength had exceeded his expectations. He was actually able to fight back against the 8,000 passing Knight Imperial Guard. Nietion's terror was unimaginable. In the blink of an eye, Nietion had killed more than 100 passing Knight Imperial Guard. Roar! At this moment, the crimson dragon roared. The terrifying dragon roar shook the heavens and the earth. At the same time, it was accompanied by a mournful wail. Although Nietion had killed many people, the crimson dragon's body was already riddled with wounds. The dragon energy was overflowing, and it couldn't support the dragon's body anymore. However, the passing Knight Imperial Guards were still staring at Nietion like tigers watching their prey. There were too many of them. Even if Nietion was brave, he couldn't kill them all. However, they were shocked by Nietion's strength. At this moment, they were all watching and didn't dare to take another step forward. A bunch of trash. Idiots. What are you looking at? Charge forward and kill Nietion. Once again, Yichunli's furious roar rang out. Like a madman, his eyes were bloodshot and scarlet red. Kill! The passing Knight Imperial Guard reacted and roared in unison. Their violent, killing aura covered the sky and the sun. Nietion felt the surging aura. His expression changed, and his face darkened. Roar! The crimson dragon roared. Its body rolled out and attacked one last time. Boom! 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 The huge dragon's body withstood countless terrifying attacks. Bang! In the end, the crimson dragon couldn't take it anymore and collapsed. Majestic dragon energy surged in the surroundings. Ha ha! The dragon is broken. The dragon is broken. Yichunli laughed wildly when he saw this scene. He shouted, Nietion, I want to see what other abilities you have. This time, you will definitely die. A ruthless and bloodthirsty voice resounded in the air. Yichunli's face was twisted like a demon. He hated Nietion too much. Being able to see the latter die, tragically with his own eyes, made him feel a perverted sense of satisfaction. Is that so? Nietion stepped out and wiped the blood at the corner of his mouth. There was no fear in his eyes. Instead, there was a strong desire to fight. You still have strength? Yichunli looked at Nie Tian from afar. Feeling the cold aura in the latter's eyes, he was so scared that his face turned pale. Even his voice was trembling. Yichunli, you will know very soon that my strength is not something you can imagine. Nie Tian roared. Then, the blood in his body surged out and merged with the sword intent, releasing a strong force. The passing Knight Imperial Guard suddenly felt Nie Tian's powerful aura. Their eyes trembled, and they exclaimed, "So strong!" Chapter 23:02. How is this possible? Yichunli felt that Nie Tian's aura had become stronger, and his initial reaction was to exclaim in shock. But the next moment, he understood and said with a shrill laugh, "Nie Tian, burn your vital energy and force yourself to fight. I will watch you from here. How long can your vital energy last?" Nie Tian's lips curled into a cold smile. He didn't bother with Yichunli at all. Instead, he looked at the passing Knight Imperial Guards and said in a low voice, "I want to kill all of you." The passing Knight Imperial Guards looked at Nie Tian's eyes and felt the latter's murderous intent. Their eyes trembled, and they couldn't hide the shock in them. At this very moment, they felt that they were little lambs, and Nie Tian was an enraged lion. "Kill!" The next moment, Nie Tian roared angrily. The aura in his body rose to the extreme, and the air around him became dark red and bloody. He slashed out with the starlight heavenly slash in his hand, and a blood-red sword shadow roared out like an angry dragon. Bang! More than 10 passing Knight Imperial Guards didn't have time to react and were killed by the sword shadow. At this moment, Nie Tian was in a berserk state. He burned the vital energy in his body without caring about anything. Combined with the power of the Fiend God, the sudden burst of sword intent wasn't something these passing Knight Imperial Guards could resist. Nie Tian was like a killing demon god. His eyes were red and fierce, and the sword intent around him was about to burst out violently. He shouted ruthlessly, "Kill! Kill, kill! Kill, kill, kill!" The terrifying sound reverberated in the air. Wherever Nie Tian's sword passed, blood would be spilled everywhere. A fierce tiger entering a flock of lambs was unstoppable. In the air, tragic cries sounded, and the smell of blood filled the entire sky. In just the blink of an eye, hundreds of passing Knight Imperial Guards died. "Trash! Are you all blockheads? Kill him for me." In the sky far away, Yichunli's roar resounded, and his face was flushed. Only at this moment did the passing Knight Imperial Guards react. "This brat's blood chi is about to run out. Let's rush over and kill him." Someone let out a low roar. Following this, more than 10 Imperial Guards moved together and attacked Nie Tian together. Human sword-cutting stars. Nie Tian's eyes were dark and fierce. He was not afraid at all. With a low roar, his long sword flashed with a cold light, and the sword's shadow whistled out. Boom! The dozen or so Imperial Guards did not resist at all and were directly swallowed by the sword shadows. The combination of the sacred heaven-defying sword, the demon god sword intent, and berserk blood energy, the explosive power of the sacred heaven-defying sword was unimaginable. Even peak paramount gods would be killed in an instant, much less late paramount gods. Nie Tian's sword fell, and he steadied himself. Blood chi surged around him, as if he was bathing in a sea of blood. His entire person exuded an incomparably violent aura. QL 11-inch Nie Tian, rush out. At this moment, Fat Cat's voice rang out anxiously. In his current state, Nie Tian couldn't hold on for much longer. The blood energy around his body was already slowly weakening, and his aura was also slowly declining. If he waited until his blood energy was almost depleted, it would be impossible for him to leave. Yeah, Nie Tian nodded, and the astral soul wings appeared on his back like 2 clouds of starlight. His figure flashed like a rainbow as he charged forward. Stop him! Stop him for this crown prince! Yichunli bellowed furiously when he saw the situation. Countless Imperial Guards of the Dead Knight moved in an instant, forming a wall in the air. Their aura was boundless and majestic. Anyone who gets in my way will die. Nyetian wasn't afraid in the slightest. He slashed out with the star heaven slash, and the sword's shadow rumbled out. It was 10,000 meters long, and the color of blood filled the air. He used all of his power in this attack. Blood energy, sword intent, the demon god's sword intent, and the power of the stars all fused together. After this attack, his aura would rapidly decline. Therefore, whether or not this sword could open a path to survival was of utmost importance. Boom! Chi, chi, chi. The next moment, the blood-colored sword shadow descended and bombarded the passing knight Imperial Guard's aura. A loud rumble was heard, followed by an ear-piercing sound. The blood-colored sword shadow continued to advance, and at the same time, it was constantly being bombarded and shattered. Stop him! We must stop him! Yi Chunli shouted in horror, and his eyes were about to pop out. His gaze trembled as he saw Nyetian's figure charging into the passing knight Imperial Guard's encirclement, and he was actually being slowly swallowed. Nyetian, you're dead. Overjoyed, he let out a fierce roar. Nyetian fell into the passing knight Imperial Guard's encirclement. How could he have any chance of survival? Roar! Roar! However, at this moment, two terrifying roars sounded in the air. Then, two enormous figures rose violently and broke through the encirclement of the passing knight Imperial Guards. This! Yi Chunli was shocked, and his eyes trembled. He finally saw clearly that those were two divine beasts. One was like a flame, and the other was like a giant dragon. The flame and giant dragon that appeared at this moment were the Golden Leo and the Pishio. Nyetian's figure stepped on the Golden Leo's head, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a faint smile. He didn't let the Golden Leo and the Pishio participate in the battle all along. Just for this moment, he knew that his final sword couldn't break through the encirclement. However, he still had two divine beasts who attacked at the most crucial moment, allowing him to break through the encirclement. Leave! Nyetian roared in a low voice, and the Golden Leo's figure soared into the sky like a ball of flame. Roar! Little Guai roared angrily, and then followed. You're not allowed to leave. Yi Chunli roared furiously when he saw the situation. His figure moved, and he actually wanted to stop Nyetian. Who do you think you are? Get lost. Nyetian sneered and cast a cold glance at Yi Chunli. He stabbed out with his sword, and the last of his blood chi and sword intent raged out. A sword shadow was drawn, and it suddenly flew out gracefully. Puff! Yi Chunli didn't expect that Nyetian still had strength left. In his panic, one of his arms was directly cut off. Yi Chunli, the next time we meet, it will be the day you die. Nyetian laughed. The Golden Leo under his feet moved like lightning, and it drew a fiery trajectory in the air. The passing knight Imperial Guard only reacted at this moment and wanted to chase after Nyetian, but it was already too late. High up in the sky, Yi Chunli's shrill roar resounded. Nyetian. But unfortunately, Nyetian's figure was already far away. At the same time, a roar resounded in the air, and a black-clothed figure appeared. It was the old ancestor of the passing knight. From the beginning to the end, the old ancestor of the passing knight was there, but he didn't make a move. Because he didn't dare. Trash, a bunch of trash. The old ancestor of the passing knight roared, and his body trembled with anger. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that Nyetian would still be able to escape, even though the dying Night Empire had dispatched 8,000 dying Night Guardsmen. Nyetian's strength grew too fast, and it was beyond the old ancestor of the passing Night Empire's expectations. This time, he couldn't kill Nyetian. The old ancestor of the passing Night felt that he wouldn't be able to kill Nyetian in the future. Looking in the direction where Nyetian's figure disappeared, the old ancestor of the passing Night said painfully after a long time, "This kid is too scary." At some point, he really wanted to do it himself. Chapter 2303. High up in the sky, Nyetian was hurrying along. He had almost reached the limits of his martial physique. His face was as pale as paper, and his body was covered in blood. Under such circumstances, he could only rely on the Golden Leo and the Pichio to hurry along. Nyetian, are you all right? Fat Cat's voice was heard. He could sense that Nyetian's breathing was unstable. It must have been because he had expended too much blood chi. Don't worry, I won't die. Nyetian smiled bitterly and asked, How is June ouching? Fat Cat appeared and entered the 9 extremities. He said, She can't hold on much longer. We must return to the Dark Night City as soon as possible. Nyetian nodded and took a deep breath. He was prepared to recover his strength and continue on his way. The Golden Leo was not slow, but compared to Nyetian, it was still slightly slower. Little Pichio was even slower, so Nyetian had already sent it back to the 9 extremities. Just then, Nyetian seemed to have sensed something and his expression changed. He raised his head and looked far into the sky. His eyes narrowed. As far as his eyes could see, several figures appeared. They were extremely fast and were rushing towards him. Oh no! Nyetian's heart sank and his expression turned ugly. He was already at the end of his tether. If another wave of enemies came, he would not be able to resist. Most importantly, June Ouching's life was in danger. He could not delay any longer. Boss Nyetian, just as he was worrying, a voice was heard. His eyes trembled and revealed a look of joy. He was very familiar with this voice. It was Gale Xiao Xiao. The next moment, a figure appeared. It was indeed Gale Xiao Xiao. Behind him were several figures. They were people from the Gale Wind clan. Boss Nyetian, are you all right? Gale Xiao Xiao saw Nyetian's pale face and could not help but ask anxiously. I'm fine. Nyetian smiled faintly and said, Gale Xiao Xiao, you came at the right time. At that moment, Gale Xiao's body and appearance had changed. His height had returned to the height of a normal person. His appearance was also normal, and he was even very handsome. Compared to the monkey from before, it was a world of difference. However, his aura did not change, so Nyetian could still recognize him at a glance. Boss Nyetian, are you really all right? Gale Little Moon could sense that Nyetian's aura was very weak, so he asked worriedly. Nyetian didn't explain too much. He had Jin enter the 9 ultimates and said to Gale Xiao Xiao, Take me back to Dark Night City. I want to see Grandmaster Zhuozhua. All right. Gale Xiao Xiao saw the anxiety on Nyetian's face and did not ask any more questions. Gale wings appeared on his back and swept Nyetian up. His figure turned into a bolt of lightning and disappeared in an instant. Boss Nyetian, old man Zhuo calculated that you would be returning soon, so he told me to wait for you nearby. As expected, I found you, Gale Little Moon said as he ran. Ever since the Dark Moon Wretch Seal had been removed, he had grown much stronger and was now an early paramount god. He moved even faster than before, like a sharp blade in the wind. Before long, Nyetian and Gale Xiao Xiao were outside of Dark Night City. If Nyetian had run the same distance, it would have taken him at least an hour, but Gale Xiao Xiao had only taken a few minutes. Without any delay, the two of them headed directly to Zhuozhua's residence. Ming Jinyu and the others were already waiting outside and were delighted to see Nyetian. Nyetian, we'll talk later, Yang Qi said. Upon landing, Nyetian hastily bid them farewell and strode into the courtyard towards the inner hall. Zhuozhua was in the courtyard, and when she saw Nyetian hurrying toward her, she couldn't help but call out, Nyetian. Beside him, there were 2 other people. One was a handsome middle-aged man, and the other was a 7 or 8-year-old child. They were none other than the reincarnated Jian Qingxi and Sakura Heaven. Nyetian didn't have much time to talk, so he had Fat Cat bring June Ouching out. Fat Cat had wrapped up June Ouching with Valurium energy so that she wouldn't be exposed. What a powerful sword seal! The moment June Ouching appeared, Zhuozhua, Jian Qingxi, and Sakura Heaven cried out at the same time. Their eyes were filled with shock. Of the 3 of them, one was a grandmaster, and the other 2 were experts of the Tao of the sword. All of them had a deep understanding of sword seals, but none of them had ever seen such a powerful sword seal. At this moment, although June Ouching's body was shrouded by the colored glass chi, the blazing sword aura could not be concealed. Tian could sense that Jun Aoqing's aura was weakening, so he didn't bother explaining. Grandmaster Zhuozhuo, is the Dragon Spring vein still there? Yes. Zhuozhuo took out the Dragon Spring vein and handed it to Tian. Jian Qingqi and Sakura Heaven were only using the power of the Dragon Spring vein to reconstruct their bodies, so they wouldn't cause any damage to the Dragon Spring vein. Fat, I'll leave the rest to you. Tian received the Dragon Spring vein and handed it to Fat Cat. Little Fat Cat nodded, and then its figure moved, bringing Jun Aoqing into the room behind the inner hall. At this moment, Tian let out a deep breath, and his nervous expression relaxed a little. He only hoped that it wasn't too late, and that the Dragon Spring vein would allow Jun Aoqing to completely awaken her bloodline sword seal. Tian, are you all right? Zhuozhuo asked concernedly when she saw Tian's pale face. I'm fine. I'll be fine after some rest. Tian smiled faintly and turned his gaze to Jian Qingqi and Sakura Heaven. Tian, thank you. Sakura Heaven looked at Tian and expressed his gratitude sincerely. Tian smiled faintly and said, We're friends. You're welcome. Tian, thank you for saving me. Jian Qingqi also spoke at this moment, but the way he looked at Tian was very unfamiliar. Elder Jian, I didn't expect you to be so young after recovering your body. Tian smiled faintly and jokingly said. He obviously knew that the person in front of him was Jian Qingqi herself, and the one that resided in his consciousness was Jian Qingqi's remnant soul. The remnant soul had already dissipated and didn't return to its original body, so Jian Qingqi didn't recognize Tian and knew nothing about what happened between him and Tian. Then, Ming Jinyu and the others also came to the inner hall. Everyone sat down and focused their attention on Tian. Boss Tian, your strength has improved a lot in the past 3 months. You must have experienced many things. Gale Little was the first to speak and chuckled. Tian nodded slightly and went on to briefly explain what had happened to him during this period of time. Everyone was dumbfounded, especially Zhuozhuo, Gale Little, and the others. They were simply stunned. How could they have imagined that Tian had gone through so much in such a short period of time? At this moment, Zhuozhuo frowned and asked with a strange expression, Tian, you just said that the girl you brought is the granddaughter of Lord Jun Shujian, the leader of the Holy Heavens Alliance, right? Yes. Tian nodded, but he didn't reveal Jun Aoqing's true identity. It seemed that Zhuozhuo had discovered something from Jun Aoqing. Master Zhuozhuo, did you discover anything? Tian's eyes narrowed as he asked. Tian, I'm afraid that girl isn't Jun Shujian's biological granddaughter. Zhuozhuo's expression changed slightly and became more solemn as he said, I feel that she's very similar to someone from the legendary Netherworld family. Netherworld family? Tian's eyes narrowed when he heard those words and asked in surprise, How did you know? If I'm not mistaken, the sword seal in her body should be the legendary Netherworld ghost bloodline. Zhuozhuo answered with a strange expression. Chapter 2304 Nether Ghost Bloodline. When everyone in the inner hall heard Zhuozhuo's words, they were all stunned as they looked at the latter in shock. No one knew what the Nether Ghost bloodline was, but they could tell that it was a powerful bloodline when they saw Zhuozhuo's body stiffening. Master Zhuozhuo, are you familiar with the Nether family and Nether Ghost bloodline that you spoke of? Tian became cold as he looked at Zhuozhuo. I'm not familiar with them, but I've heard of them. Zhuozhuo calmed down with a gentle expression. Thereafter, he continued, I don't know much about the Nether family, but I know that it's a powerful family in an empire. A long time ago, when the Forsaken Lands was just formed, the entire Forsaken Lands was ruled by 2 powerful families. One of them is the Heavenly Evil family, while the other is the Nether family. Heavenly Evil, Nether family. When Tian heard the names of the 2 families, his eyes trembled as he couldn't help exclaiming out. He wasn't unfamiliar with those 2 names. The Heavenly Evil Monarch, 7 Calamities, and Tianxia Shaoqian that appeared on Mount Xingtian claimed that they were from the Heavenly Evil family. They even claimed that Jun Aoqing was from the Nether family, and she's the princess of the Nether Empire. She's also the last member of the Nether family. But according to Zhuozhuo, The heavenly evil family and nether family were once powerful and even ruled the Forsaken Lands. The strength of these two great families should be very strong. But why didn't anyone in the Forsaken Lands know anything about the heavenly evil nether family? It was as if the heavenly evil nether family had gone into seclusion. Nyetian, you know about the heavenly evil nether family? Zhuozhua couldn't help asking when she saw Nyetian's reaction. Everyone turned to look at Nyetian as well. Yeah, Nyetian nodded his head as he briefly explained how he encountered the heavenly evil monarch's party. Everyone was dumbfounded and they were speechless for a long time. According to Nyetian, a servant of the Tian Sief family, the Ghost Valley's 7 calamities could easily defeat the 3 legends. This was simply too terrifying. Judging from this, one could tell how powerful the heavenly evil monarch was. Everyone even wondered if there was really such a powerful person in the Forsaken Land. Nyetian, I believe you, Nyetian said. After a long time, Zhuozhua heavily nodded her head and said, although the heavenly evil and nether clans suddenly disappeared from the abandoned land for some unknown reason. However, since these 2 great families once ruled the Forsaken Land, their strength is definitely unimaginable. At this moment, Gale Xiao Xiao furrowed his brows and asked in confusion, if the heavenly demon family has such a powerful expert, why would they hide themselves? The others also had the same puzzled expression, and they had the same question in their hearts. The heavenly evil family was so powerful. Why did they have to live in seclusion? Which powerful family or organization did not want to rule a region and be worshipped by 10,000 people? I don't know either. Shaking her head, Zhuozhua sighed. According to rumors, the heavenly evil and nether clans originated from the same bloodline. But for some unknown reason, the 2 clans split up. Perhaps the separation of the 2 clans is the reason why they went into seclusion. Nyetian nodded his head. He had also heard from the heavenly evil monarch that the heavenly evil and nether clans originated from the same bloodline. Master Zhuozhua, what's the nether ghost bloodline that you're talking about? Nyetian looked at Zhuozhua with his brows knitted. The corner of Zhuozhua's lips twitched with a playful smile. According to legends, the reason why the heavenly evil and nether clans could rule the Forsaken Land is due to their Xiantian martial meridians. Xiantian martial meridians? Everyone was stunned. They had never heard of Xiantian martial meridians. Squinting his eyes, Zhuozhua continued, as everyone knows, there are some special cultivators that possess the power of bloodlines. Xiantian martial meridians are martial meridians nurtured by the heavens and earth. Xiantian martial meridians are things of the heavens and earth, but when a cultivator obtains them, they can fuse with the cultivator's martial physique and become their bloodline power. Martial meridians of the heavens and earth. Hearing this name, everyone's eyes trembled. The shock in their hearts was perfectly displayed on their faces. Of course, everyone had heard of the power of bloodlines. This was a power that was nurtured by a powerful cultivator after their martial physique became stronger. It was then passed on to the next generation through bloodlines. However, no one had ever heard of the term Xiantian martial meridians. No matter how abnormal the power of bloodlines was, they were still nurtured by cultivators. However, Xiantian martial meridians were nurtured by the heavens and earth. These were 2 completely different concepts. The difference in quality. Nyetian was not too surprised when he heard about the Xiantian martial meridians. Previously, he had already come into contact with the sacred arrays and the tripartite sacred array and learned the sacred heaven defying sword from the tripartite sacred array. According to the sacred heaven ancestor, the tripartite sacred array was a natural array formed by the heavens and earth. Since the heavens and earth could form the sacred array, it was not surprising that the Xiantian martial meridians were born. However, from Zhuozhua's tone, it seemed that the Xiantian martial meridians were very terrifying. Zhuozhua paused for a moment before continuing. Rumor has it that the ancestors of the Heavenly Fiend and Netherworld clans obtained 2 Xiantian martial meridians. After they obtained the Xiantian martial meridians, They fused it with their martial physiques and formed their own bloodline power. Since then, the Heavenly Fiend and Netherworld clans became powerful and rose in the Abandoned Land in a short period of time, becoming the rulers of the Abandoned Land. Everyone's expressions were filled with astonishment and shock. The Sciention martial meridians were too powerful. The Heavenly Fiend and Netherworld ancestors relied on the Sciention martial meridians to rule the Abandoned Land. Nietion became cold and asked, Grandmaster, you mean that June Ouching is a member of the Netherworld clan, and the bloodline seal in her body is the Sciention martial meridians obtained by the Netherworld clan? Yes. Zhuo nodded heavily and said, the Sciention martial meridians obtained by the Heavenly Fiend clan are called the Heavenly Fiend Profound Meridians. The Sciention martial meridians obtained by the Netherworld clan are called the Netherworld Ghost Meridians. The aura sealed in Miss June Ouching's body is the aura of the Netherworld Ghost Meridians. After saying that, beads of sweat appeared on Zhuo's forehead. His face was filled with confusion and shock, as if he had sensed something terrifying. Grandmaster Zhuo. Nietion was confused and did not pay much attention to Zhuo's expression. He asked, according to what you said, the Netherworld Ghost Meridians in June Ouching's body should be an extremely powerful Sciention martial meridians. Then why would the Netherworld Ghost Meridians in her body become a bloodline seal? Could it be that the power of the seal comes from the Netherworld Ghost Meridians? A bloodline power with its own seal? That's not possible, right? Nietion expressed his doubts and stared straight at Zhuo, hoping that the latter could give him an answer. QL11. The eyes of the others were also filled with doubt. Chapter 23:05. In the inner hall, Zhuo's eyes widened when he heard Nietion's question. The astonishment on his face grew stronger. Master Zhuo? Nietion exclaimed after seeing Zhuo's reaction. I'm fine. Zhuo waved his hand slightly, but the sweat on his forehead had already reached his cheeks. He had indeed realized something extremely frightening. Nietion did not dare to ask further. He waited patiently to give Zhuo some time to digest his thoughts. A moment later, Zhuo let out a deep breath and calmed his expression before he finally spoke. Nietion, the question in your heart is exactly what I'm afraid of. What is it? Nietion's eyes glistened as he asked in astonishment. Zhuo's expression was extremely unpleasant. It seemed like it was something serious. From what I know, the Serene Ghost Meridian is a type of Sciention martial meridian without any sealing force. Zhuo nodded and said, however, there is indeed a powerful sealing force in Miss June Ouching's body. The sealing force does not originate from the Serene Ghost Meridian. It's an external force. It seems to be used to suppress the Serene Ghost Meridian. Upon saying this, Zhuo's eyes trembled as his expression stiffened. Ming Jinyu and the others were stunned after hearing Zhuo's words, leaving them speechless. Nietion, on the other hand, was relatively calm. At that moment, he finally understood why Zhuo was so shocked. The sealing force in June Ouching's body did not originate from the Serene Ghost Meridian, but a man-made sealing force. The sealing force was used to suppress the Serene Ghost Meridian. QL11. In other words, someone had left a powerful sealing force in June Ouching's body to suppress the growth of the Serene Ghost Meridian. Who was the person who left the seal behind? Why did the person not want June Ouching to awaken the Serene Ghost Meridian? Could it be June Chujian? Nietion's eyes trembled as June Chujian's face appeared in his mind. The heavenly evil monarch once said that June Chujian was the annihilator of the Netherworld family. It was not normal for June Chujian to adopt June Ouching. It was indeed possible that he had left a seal in June Ouching's body to suppress the Netherworld ghost vein. However, since June Chujian had adopted June Ouching, why would he suppress her growth? At this moment, Zhuo suddenly looked at Nietion, and she actually saw through his thoughts and spoke in a low voice. Nietion, are you thinking that this seal might have been left behind by Lord June Chujian? Nietion nodded with a solemn expression. He had no idea what had happened between Jun Chujian and the Netherworld family. According to what Jun Chujian had said, there must be a hidden story behind the matter back then. Furthermore, Niet Tian could tell that Jun Chujian wasn't a bloodthirsty person. There must be a reason why he annihilated the Netherworld family back then. It was so much so that Niet Tian even suspected if Jun Chujian could annihilate the entire Netherworld family with his strength. Although Jun Chujian was powerful, his strength was too weak when compared to the Heavenly Evil family. Since the Netherworld family was on the same level as the Heavenly Evil family, then the two families should be on the same level. Even if there was a difference in strength, there shouldn't be much of a difference. A single Heavenly Evil monarch from the Heavenly Evil family could suppress Jun Chujian. Could it be that there wasn't anyone in the Netherworld family that could stand on the same level as the Heavenly Evil monarch? Jun Chujian had single-handedly annihilated the entire Yuming family. This didn't sound very likely. It's not him. Zhuozhuo looked at Niet Tian and shook her head. I've met Jun Chujian a few times, and I'm familiar with his sword intent. Furthermore, I feel that his strength isn't sufficient to unleash such a powerful seal. That's impossible, right? Before Zhuozhuo could finish her words, Gale Xiao exclaimed, Lord Jun Chujian is a pinnacle swordsman in the Forsaken Land. Even the three legends are beneath him. The seal in that girl's body is that powerful? Even Lord Jun Chujian can't do it? Everyone's faces changed as they were shocked. Although they had no idea who Jun Chujian was, they could imagine how powerful he was since he was more terrifying than the three legends. If even Jun Chujian couldn't leave such a powerful seal, then it would be terrifying. Sweeping a glance at everyone, Zhuozhuo shook her head. Jun Chujian's terror lies in his sword Dao, not his Dao of seals. Furthermore, he doesn't have any understanding of the Netherworld bloodline, so it's impossible for him to be the one who left the seal. What do you mean? Niet Tian asked with his eyes narrowed. Zhuozhuo's face darkened. Although I have only seen Miss Jun ouching for a short time, I can sense that the seal in her body is to suppress the Netherworld ghost vein. Evidently, the person who left the seal is extremely familiar with the Netherworld bloodline and knows how to suppress it. As she spoke, Zhuozhuo's face changed and her tone turned solemn. If I've guessed correctly, there's a high possibility that the person who left the seal is someone who also possesses the Netherworld bloodline. When everyone heard Zhuozhuo's words, they sucked in a cold breath and their expressions froze. The person who left the seal in Jun Ouching's body turned out to be someone who possessed the Netherworld bloodline as well. Didn't that mean that the Netherworld family was the one who sealed Jun Ouching's Netherworld bloodline? Why would the Netherworld family do that? Niet Tian was stunned. His mind was in a mess. It seemed that things were much more complicated than he had imagined. Master Zhuozhuo, are you sure about this? After a long time, Niet Tian suddenly raised his head and asked Zhuozhuo. Zhuozhuo nodded. The Khanate martial meridian isn't that easy to suppress. Even if my speculation isn't 100% correct, there's a 90% chance that it's true. Niet Tian's frown deepened. He didn't expect things to be so complicated. It seemed that Fat Cat wasn't right when he said that Jun Ouching had a bloodline seal in her body. After all, Fat Cat only had 7 tails. It wasn't strange for him to be wrong about certain things. It wasn't a bloodline seal in Jun Ouching's body, but the Netherworld bloodline that was being suppressed. Oh no! In the next moment, Niet Tian suddenly thought of something. His expression changed as he exclaimed, Jun Ouching. Fat Cat had misjudged Jun Ouching's situation. Would he make the wrong move because of this? Niet Tian, what's wrong? Zhuozhuo asked in surprise when she saw Niet Tian's sudden action. I don't have time to explain, Niet Tian hurriedly said. His figure moved, and he rushed into the inner hall. Boom! But at this moment, a loud explosion was suddenly heard from the inner hall. Immediately after, a terrifying energy wave spread out in all directions like a violent ripple. Niet Tian's figure suddenly froze. Suddenly, he saw a shadow flying over. His eyes trembled as he exclaimed, Fat! At this moment, the thing flying over was none other than Fat Cat's figure.